We're going to first kick things off by hearing from the veterans of foreign wars. I want to thank you, special thank you to the VFW members who have traveled from every corner of our state to be here, particularly the Montanans in attendance, which include Joe Fletcher, Tim Peters, Jack Hawley, James Layton, and Fred Hamilton. Thanks for being here, fellas. I am proud to have recently introduced the Fred Hamilton Lost Military Records Act based on Fred's own experiences as a Montana vet trying to get access to his earned benefits. When military treatment records are lost after being transmitted to the VA by the Department of Defense, this bill would allow the VA to consider other documentation when determining compensation and pension benefits. This is a great example of how Congress relies on the VFW to keep us updated on the needs of our veterans and their families, and how we best support these folks. Historic achievements like the PACT Act simply wouldn't have been possible without your vision, your leadership, and your passion. Thank you. And make no mistake about this, it was the VSOs and the veterans who put pressure on Congress to do the right thing for our toxically exposed veterans and their survivors. You made democracy work. You held us accountable. And you flipped the votes to get the job done. We now are focused on getting the Major Richard Starr Act across the finish line to finally deliver combat injured veterans their full DOD and VA benefits, and passing the Elizabeth Dole 21st Century Veterans Healthcare and Benefits Improvement Act to bolster veterans' access to healthcare benefits and services for which they are entitled and for which they deserve. We also need to hold claim sharks accountable for preying on veterans' hard-earned benefits through the Guard VA Benefits Act. But just like with the PACT Act, we need your continued partnership to be successful. Your advocacy is democracy at work, and we're here today to continue taking our cues from you on the work ahead. So thank you for being here. With that, I will turn it over to Chairman Bost.
Thank you, Chairman Tessler. Good morning. Say a special hello to all of you, and a special hello to all those from Illinois. And if you're from Illinois, you know my part of Illinois is way south. But we want to thank you for being here. And we want to thanks to you and our friends on the other side of the Capitol for hosting this first joint hearing during the second session of the 118th Congress. Now, it is an honor to join my friends, Chairman Tessler, Ranking Member Moran, and Ranking Member Takano, in welcoming you to the VSO hearing. I would also like to thank the VFW's National Commander-in-Chief, Dwayne Sarmiento, I want to get that right, Sarmiento, and his wife, Ellen, for being here today. And I would also like to give a shout out to the Illinois State Commander, Mr. Brett Nella. Now, if you are joining us from Illinois, I want you, if you would, just stand, wave, would you? Okay, fantastic. A few in the back there. All right. Well, welcome to D.C., and thank you for traveling here from the best state in the union. There.
I don't know about that.
We knew we'd get a response. As most of you know by now, being a chairman is not a responsibility I take lightly. It's very personal to me and my family. Many of you know I'm a Marine. Hoorah! Yeah. As a third-generation Marine, and my son is a lieutenant colonel at this time, and a grandson who's a corporal at this time in the Marine Corps. So you can see it's a family thing. But with that, our family knows, and each one of us up here know the sacrifices you've made. And I know that at the end of the day, you just want the access to health care, benefits, and services you've earned without a headache. The veterans of foreign war are great advocates for both here in D.C. and across the country in every community. You have my commitment that we will continue to fight for you and the voices you represent. You just heard you just as hard as you have fought for us. That's why we want to make sure we do that. You know, I'm proud of all that we have accomplished together in the last few years, as mentioned by the chairman, including the president signing into the bipartisan PACT Act into law, The legislation is the largest expansion of health care and benefits for veterans and their families in recent history, and we're going to make sure the VA gets it right. And when they make mistakes, I'll be the first to hold them accountable and get answers for you if they've made those mistakes. We need all of you to continue to let us know what is happening out in the field, and when it comes to wait times for toxic exposed veterans, health care, and other claims decisions. As chairman, a top priority of mine is to hold VA accountable for you, the men and the women who serve no matter what. So please call or visit our website or call us to report any waste, fraud, or abuse. We need your help in making the VA what you deserve. Now, looking ahead, I'm focused on making improvements where we can to modernize the delivery of care and services at the VA. We have made great progress in identifying improvements that could be made to the Transition Assistance Program, or the TAP program, through our oversight efforts. See, the TAP program, I always tell people that whenever I got out of the Corps, we had a TAP program. The colonel tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, I'll see you later." And that was it. So we've actually improved quite a bit by having it, and we're working on the legislation to increase accountability at DOD as well, as adding separate TAP courses for National Guard and Reserve and military spouses. We will make sure TAP is worthwhile experience for every single service member. Now, I'm also proud to have led the efforts to safeguard veterans' Second Amendment rights. As a chairman of VA and as a sportsman, fixing the VA's discriminatory process towards veterans was a challenge, and I'm going off script here. But I'm going to tell you, the frustration I felt when found out that a veteran, all they have to do is seek from the VA, and have done this for 30 years. All they do is ask for a fiduciary, and if they get a fiduciary, they lose their Second Amendment rights without due process. That's ridiculous. It's went on too long. It's discouraged veterans from going to seek the VA, and we were hoping we're getting that problem fixed now. We will be working on that through the budget that's hopefully passing today. I'm proud to say that our efforts have drawn attention to this injustice, and they paid off. The language of my bill is currently included in the VA's appropriation bill and will soon become law. As the VFW knows, fixing this is long overdue. I thank Senator Moran and Tester for helping to get us this provision across the finish line. And I believe Senator Moran introduced that bill the first time back in 2009. So it's finally coming to fruition. Right now, we're in a bipartisan negotiation to get the package for the Veterans Bill to the President's desk as well. This comprehensive package includes many VFW's priorities, like expansion to the VA long-term care service to put veterans into control of where they want to live out their days. Strengthening the community care programs, expansion to the Vet Tech education program, and support for homeless programs to ensure VA can continue to lift veterans out of homelessness and get them back on track, and so much more. Now, I would like to, with my colleagues, to get this package done as soon as possible. But make no mistake, our work is nowhere near close to being finished. On the side of on my side of the Capitol, we're having held over 50 oversight hearings, brought more than 100 VA officials to answer to the veterans taxpayers that they serve, and connected with over 10,000 veterans and their families throughout through in-person and telephone town halls. My door is always open and will continue to always be open, because veterans are still fighting a VA bureaucracy to access the benefits that they want when and where they need them, dealing with the unperforming VA employees who don't have the veterans' best interests in mind, and reeling with the impact of Bidenomics and raising costs of living, which is returning causes, increasing the homelessness across the country, including with our veterans. These might seem like small things, but when it comes down to it, they impact veterans every single day. And I will ensure that the VA gets the budget it needs to complete its goals. I look forward to meeting that mission alongside of all of you. And I thank you again for being here today. And with that, I yield back.
I will now recognize Ranking Member Moran.
Chairman Tester, thank you. And thank you and Chairman Bost for hosting us. And it's good to be here with both of you and Ranking Member Takano once again as we do our oversight and hear our instructions and suggestions from the VFW and many VSO organizations today and tomorrow. I thank all of our witnesses for being here, for the members who traveled to join us here today, for service members and their family members, for veterans, for caregivers, all who are here to care and love and see that we do the right thing when it comes to those who served our country. I highlight the Kansans who are in the office, and I appreciate the strong relationship and friendship we have. It was good to see the VFW in our office yesterday and DAV tomorrow and others throughout this week. None of the work we do here is at all possible without the contributions and support, the efforts that are made by the VSO community, including those present today. We, in my view, have accomplished some major things in recent years. None are insignificant and all are important, but there is more, much more to be done, particularly in making certain that when we pass legislation, it's not just a high five and a press release. It actually results in the increased well-being and welfare of those veterans that we are committed to serving. We need to make sure that DC, the Department of Veterans Affairs, is implementing correctly. And when we've made errors in our legislation, we need to make sure those errors are corrected. I know that many in this room share priorities together in this second session of Congress, including protecting and expanding and ensuring timely access to quality health care, both at the VA, medical facilities, and in the community, ensuring proper implementation of the PACT Act to avoid further backlog of disability claims, engaging with VA to make certain that the PACT Act's presumptive decision process is responsive to veterans, increasing and updating benefits for survivors, assisting veterans in rural areas with unique challenges they face, continuing efforts to prevent veteran suicide, strengthening and supporting for transitioning members, service members, student veterans, and homeless veterans, as well as individuals within the caregiver, survivor, and guard and reserve communities. This is a great committee to serve on. I've served on it since my original days in the House. 14 years in the House, 14 years in the Senate. I've asked for this committee assignment in all of my time in Congress. And I want to take this opportunity to continue to express my gratitude for the help by those in this room and my commitment to work together this year and into the future. Thank you all for your tireless advocacy on behalf of veterans and survivors across the country. Your efforts are critical. They do make a difference, and every American should know the value of the Veteran Service Organization, and every veteran should see the opportunities to serve other veterans through a VSO. I look forward to your testimony, and I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Moran. I'll now recognize Ranking Member Takano.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Tester. Before I begin my comments, I'd like to just take a moment to send well wishes to Rick Weidman. Many of us know and have worked with Mr. Weidman over the years, and he has been a forceful advocate for veterans on behalf of Vietnam Veterans of America. Rick, you are in our thoughts, and I look forward to your returning to hold us accountable and ensuring that Congress properly supports the next generation of service members and veterans. Well, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Moran, thank you for hosting us here on the Senate side, and it's a pleasure to be here with my colleague Chairman Bost, and it's great to see all the VSO members and veteran advocates here for our annual discussion of priorities. First and most important question, are there any Californians in the room? California, in my opinion, is the best state. So welcome, and I thank all of you who could not be with us in person and who are watching us at home. So it's an honor to join all the members of the House and Senate Committees on Veterans Affairs to hear directly from the Commander-in-Chief and representatives of Veterans of Foreign Wars. I would also like to welcome the organizations we'll be hearing from on the second panel. It's great to have all of you here as well, and I look forward to hearing about your priorities. And I thank you all for your continued advocacy and support for the veteran community. Now, as we approach the 2-year anniversary of the Honoring Our PACT Act, implementation of that historic legislation remains a high priority for both me personally and the House Veterans Affairs Committee Democrats at large. We remain committed to ensuring that VA has the resources it needs to do the job we asked it to do, and that it does that job to the best of its ability. And I will resist vigorously any attempts to undermine the law and shift back to the old funding paradigm of pitting one veterans program against another or against other domestic spending priorities by undermining the Toxic Exposure Fund, which is used to pay for PACT Act health care and benefits, as some have proposed to undermine. Veterans and their families deserve better than that, and so I hope VFW and other VSOs will join me in opposing any efforts to pull back from the promise of the PACT Act. To date, VA is receiving and processing more claims for disability compensation than ever before. VA has opened its doors in extraordinary ways to more toxic exposed veterans so they can get the care they need. The last I looked at the dashboard, 720,000 claims have been approved for the PACT Act. And while the PACT Act continues to be a good news story, the law is not without its challenges, particularly with respect to hiring and training of new staff, modernizing aging medical facilities, and enacting information technology updates. So as I said, we will continue to monitor VA's progress with this law and push the department harder when necessary. And I will work to build on the success of the PACT Act to expand coverage for veterans exposed to toxins both abroad and here at home. But beyond the PACT Act, however, a great deal remains to be done on behalf of veterans during this Congress. And among my principal priorities are preserving women veterans' health care freedoms, including by ensuring that they have access to the full range of reproductive care and counseling, including IVF, which Julia Brownlee has an excellent bill on the Veterans Infertility Treatment Act, which would codify access to IVF and remove the service connection requirement. So IVF, so reproductive health care is veterans' health care, and we must make it the law. Delivering VA for all veterans, irrespective of their age, gender, sexual orientation, or race. Working to end veteran homelessness and food insecurity. Ensuring benefits parity for Americans veterans, whether they be active duty, guard, or reserve. And rejecting efforts to privatize VA by siphoning off more of VHA's budget for private health care. Now, unfortunately, we have yet to make much progress on those issues in this Congress. In fact, we have seen a noticeable backslide on a number of key veterans' priorities over the last year, like veterans' homelessness and suicide. We have seen issues related to caregivers and survivors get nothing but lip service. And we've seen an exponential growth in the number and scale of claim sharks, which my colleague Chris Pappas has been trying to crack down on with his excellent GUARD Act. But sadly, the legislative response to those issues from this Congress has largely been non-existent. Instead, we've spent time chasing scandals where they don't exist, complaining about flags and mottos, and arguing about whether it's a good thing that VA is open and welcoming to veterans from all walks of life. At best, it has been a distraction from the more pressing issues at hand, and at worst, it has been a case of severely misplaced legislative priorities. However, I commit to those who are watching today that I will continue to fight for real, concrete, actionable solutions to the problems veterans currently face. Now, I trust that I will continue to have the VSOs as a partner in that effort. You all have been a tremendous force for good, especially when that voice is unified toward the same policy goal. We saw that with your collective advocacy for the PACT Act, which was instrumental in getting that bill over the hump. And so I applaud your past efforts and I encourage your future ones. And I will always be your champion. I will add, though, that I am less optimistic, albeit still hopeful, about the willingness or ability of the House majority to do what is right and necessary to address key veterans' priorities. Case in point, I think everyone in this room, probably in this country, views ending veteran homelessness as a key priority. And I would posit that this is indeed an eminently achievable goal. There are policy tools that we know work well and quickly to reduce homelessness among veterans. Yet we have allowed VA's authority to use those tools to expire. And in our efforts to renew them through the HOME Act, we've continually heard complaints about cost and complexity. Not to mention that we have seen the cynical ploy of pushing through knowingly flawed legislation that the Senate can't do anything with to pretend that the issue has been addressed, as was the case with both the HOME Act and the Elizabeth Dole Home Care Act. And on top of that, the improved versions of both of these bills are now being held hostage to the majority's desire to privatize more VA health care. So I implore my colleagues to reject the politics of scandal and the culture war and focus on the real and actual problems that veterans face on a daily basis so that we can make real, lasting progress. Veterans deserve better than what this Congress is currently delivering. We can do better, and we have to muster up the courage to deliver. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for yielding, and I will conclude by simply saying, don't feed the sharks.
I don't know if the VFW knows this, but you've got some fine people back here working in Washington, D.C., and I want to introduce one of them, Executive Director of the VFW Washington office, Ryan Gallucci, to introduce the VFW national officers.
Thank you, Chairman Tester. Members of the Senate House Veterans Affairs Committees, I'm honored to have the privilege of introducing the national officers of the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States and our auxiliary. Mr. Chairman, please allow me to ask those to be introduced to please remain standing, and I wish to request the audience to hold its applause until all have been introduced. From the VFW Auxiliary, our National VFW Auxiliary President, Carla Martinez from Utah. Senior Vice President of our auxiliary, Brenda Bryant of Missouri. Junior Vice President, Lois Callahan from Arkansas. And the National Auxiliary Secretary Treasurer, Ann Pantelikis from Connecticut, and Commander-in-Chief's wife, Ellen Sarmiento from New Jersey. Now our VFW national officers. Senior Vice Commander-in-Chief, Alfred J. Al Liphart and his wife, Carol from Georgia. Junior Vice Commander-in-Chief, Carol Whitmore and her husband, Brad from Iowa. Junior Vice Commander-in-Chief Designee, Tim Peters from Montana. Adjutant General Dan West from Texas. Quartermaster General Mark Garduno from Delaware. Assistant Adjutant General Brian Walker from Tennessee. Chaplain David Frey from Idaho. Judge Advocate General J. Douglas Whitaker from Mississippi. Chief of Staff Carrie Pritchett from New Jersey. Inspector General Peter J. Massetti from Germany. Surgeon General Curtis Doc Bowman from Oklahoma. Now joining the VFW Commander-in-Chief here on the dais, Chairman of the VFW National Legislative Committee, Stanley Borashevitz from Connecticut. Director, VFW National Legislative Service, Patrick D. Murray from Rhode Island. I'll skip over Representative Van Drew and our Commander-in-Chief. Director of VFW National Veterans Service, Michael Figlioli from Massachusetts. Finally, I would like to recognize the 10th class of VFW SVA Legislative Fellows, our past auxiliary presidents and past VFW commanders-in-chief who are with us, as well as, I don't know if they came in, but Tanya Starr, the widow of Major Richard Starr, and Senator Elizabeth Dole, a champion for our nation's caregivers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you all for being here. Now I want to recognize Representative Jeff Van Drew to introduce VFW Commander Sarmiento.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, Senators, my colleagues in the House of Representatives, it is an honor to be here, and it is my honor to introduce Dwayne Sarmiento, a good New Jersey name, right?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
He's a distinguished man and a distinguished individual, a man who spent most of his life dedicated to serving his nation, a fellow native of my South Jersey, a commander-in-chief of the Veterans of Foreign Wars. Mr. Dwayne Sarmiento is a great man. He was born and raised in New Jersey. Dwayne enlisted in the United States Navy in 1988. He served on active duty from 1988 to 1997, and in the United States Reserve from 2002 to 2006. During his time on active duty, Dwayne deployed in support of Operations Desert Storm and Desert Shield. where he earned his VFW eligibility. In recognition of his service, he received the Navy Achievement Medal, the Navy Combat Action Ribbon, the Navy Good Contact Medal, the Southwest Asia Service Medal with 3 campaign stars, Saudi Arabian Medal for the liberation of Kuwait, and the Kuwaiti Medal for the liberation of Kuwait again, and numerous other medals and ribbons, too many to name here today. Following his military service, Dwayne chose to continue serving his community of Gloucester County in the state of New Jersey. He served as a police officer with the Greenwich Township Police Department and later the Gloucester County Sheriff's Department. Yeah, he's done a lot of stuff. Upon his retirement from law enforcement, Dwayne served his fellow veterans in Gloucester County as the County Director of Veterans Affairs. He held that position until his election as a VFW National Officer. Dwayne joined the VFW in 1990 at Post 5579 in Gibbstown, New Jersey, where he maintains his Gold Legacy Life membership. He has served in elected and appointed positions in the Post District, Department, and national levels, to include his election as a State Commander, VFW Department of New Jersey from 2018 to 2019. On July 27th, 2023, Dwayne was elected as the 115th Commander-in-Chief of our nation's most established combat veterans organization, the VFW. Since his election, Dwayne has continued connecting with and understanding the experiences of veterans, active service members, and their families. Not only has he traveled across the country and visiting their families in almost all of the 50 states, but has also visited veterans and our men and women in uniform, living and serving overseas in Europe, Central America, and Southeast Asia. Dwayne has made it his mission to advance the VFW's 3 pillars of advocacy: assistance and camaraderie. He is committed to serving those who serve and embrace them and advocating for them wherever he travels. That's why he's here to testify on their behalf today. You know, there are just a few brief words on veterans. I served in the VA as a dentist. And I saw broken hearts, broken bodies, broken minds, and broken souls. There are no words, there are no proclamations, there are no resolutions, there are no awards that we can give them that suffice for what they've done and what they are willing to do. I'll be happy one day when we don't hear the words unemployed veterans, homeless veterans, veterans without health care, veterans that don't have educational opportunities, veterans with a higher suicide rate than anybody else in the United States of America, and veterans and active military that don't have to have woke policies forced upon them. We need a strong military and strong support for our veterans, period. Dwayne represents that. I am proud to introduce them. God bless you, Dwayne. God bless this VFW. God bless this committee for the work it does. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman, for that introduction. Congressman Sarmiento, I will now turn it over to you for the VFW's.
He'd be in my district. He'd beat me.
He hasn't.
He probably could.
He hasn't told you that he just filed yesterday.
I got to check. Come on, Dwayne. You didn't tell me.
I'll tell you one thing. When I called you Congressman, I got Bost's attention. I'll tell you that. Commander Sarmiento, I'll now turn it over to you for VFW's opening statement. Thank you all for being here, and we look forward to your statement.
Chairman Tester and Bost, ranking members Moran and Takano, thank you for the opportunity to represent the 1.4 million members of the VFW and our auxiliary here today. The 117th Congress passed the PAC Act, which was a generational bill that provided care and benefits for veterans of all eras. I'd like to take this moment to show you just who the VFW represents and why the PACT Act was so important to us. It provided expanded care for Vietnam veterans exposed to Agent Orange. Could my Vietnam veterans please stand? It provided expanded care for Gulf War veterans exposed to sarin and other unknown chemicals and toxins. Could my Gulf War veterans please stand? And it provided new presumptive conditions in care for veterans who served in Iraq, Afghanistan, Africa, Eastern Europe, and other areas where they were exposed to burn pits and other airborne hazards. Could my post-9/11 veterans please stand? Thank you. This is who the VFW is and who your work is helping today. The men and women in this room are a cross-section of the VFW, a cross-section of our veteran population, and a cross-section of America. This is why I call upon you as our leaders in Washington, D.C., to continue fighting for those who served, are still serving, and to every day meet the challenge. Now let's talk about claim sharks. With the passage of the PACT Act, the VFW saw an increase in online advertisements from predatory claim sharks that target veterans' earned VA benefits. They argue that the high fees they charge make them more effective in assisting veterans than the free services offered by VA-accredited veteran service organizations. That is false. They say that there's no way for them to seek VA accreditation. That is also false. Anyone can seek accreditation, but they refuse to do so because they would no longer be able to charge exorbitant fees, especially for work they didn't do. Companies that prey upon veterans and disregard the law must be held accountable, not rewarded with legislation to legalize their predatory behavior. It's distasteful that these claim sharks take money from veterans, but it's absolutely disgusting that they take money from survivors. The VFW strongly supports the Guard VA Benefit Act, which would only reinstate penalties for charging veterans unauthorized fees for VA claims. Claim sharks are spending millions of dollars to lobby against the Guard Act here in D.C., stalling a federal fix. So instead, we're working in the states to enforce the law. New Jersey and New York have already made claim sharks illegal, and bills are moving forward through the legislatures all around the country. The claim sharks have fought our bills in every state and continue to try to buy influence. But we will never give up because we have the law and the moral high ground on our side. Yeah. This is why it is so important to the VFW, because VA claims are the gateway to life-saving care and benefits. We invest heavily in our professional service program at 24 military bases. Every year, VFW-accredited representatives assist approximately 20,000 service members with their benefits delivery at discharge or BDD claims before they leave the military, meaning they can receive benefits almost immediately upon separation for free. Unfortunately, access to accredited representatives for BDD is inconsistent. That is why the VFW highly recommends the passage of the TAP Promotion Act, which will ensure all service members have direct access to accredited representatives during TAP classes. The VFW commends the VA for starting down this path in January, but this only reinforces the need to make this the law. Transition is an important milestone in a service member's life, and the VFW believes we need to do everything we can to support that journey. That is why the VFW works with like-minded organizations like Onward Ops, USO Pathfinder, and Wounded Warrior Project to offer data-driven resources for transitioning service members. We have also partnered with Columbia University to produce a report on transition that will come from real-time experiences from those exiting the military. Recently, transitioned former junior enlisted veterans have higher rates of homelessness, unemployment, and suicide than other veterans. We must do everything we can to help ease that transition, especially for those who are at higher risk. Trying to stop suicide or homelessness is meaningless if we ignore the root causes. The VFW urges Congress to pass not just a number act, to direct VA to report on all its programs and veterans in crisis. Preventing crisis requires that looking at more than when was your last mental health appointment. We need to look at all VA benefits to know what actually works instead of fumbling to react when it's too late. VA's own research shows that factors like financial stability, housing, and jobs protect against crisis. But if veterans have problems accessing benefits like the GI Bill, why would they trust the VA with their health care? After years of sounding this alarm, VFW is optimistic that VA may finally be listening, but we can do more. After the Navy, I spent 20 years as a police officer. If you got the gun in your mouth, it's too late. We need to understand what happens before a veteran gets to that point. Next, we need to make sure our veterans receive the full benefits they have earned. Year after year, and Congress after Congress, the VFW has advocated to fix concurrent receipt, and this year is no different, because Congress has yet to finish the work it started and promised to finish 20 years ago. Our government says it holds veterans in high regard, yet we keep using them as a way to save money. Military retirement and VA disability are two fundamentally different benefits earned for two entirely different reasons, yet the law calls this double dipping. The Major Richard Starr Act gained overwhelming bipartisan and bicameral support from the 117th Congress, yet not enough to send it to the president's desk. The VFW fears the 118th Congress will end up with the same result. We must pass the Richard Starr Act so veterans receive the full benefits they have earned through their blood and sweat in service to our country. Another inequity that demands the attention of Congress is how we treat our veterans living overseas. I'm a Filipino-Italian-American from New Jersey. I know it's an odd mix. I still have many friends and family who live overseas. Many are veterans who have earned care and benefits through their service. We know there will never be the same level of care outside the U.S., but what many overseas veterans face is indifference and apathy. Common services like direct deposit are not available to overseas veterans. In many countries, services like medical care and postal service for veterans are being reduced. These aren't just veterans who retired for a better beach. Many of these veterans are still employees who work for the Department of Defense or state supporting interest in the military mission. Cutting off service for overseas veterans should be viewed as a national security risk, which is why we need to enact common sense reforms for veterans living outside the U.S. This is why the VFW calls on Congress to undertake substantial reform to the VA Foreign Medical Program. I want to thank my Congressman, Jeff Van Drew, for his interest in our efforts. The current Foreign Medical Program is literally a riddle wrapped in a puzzle because experiences vary widely depending on where you are and who you know. We have to provide consistent access to care and support to veterans overseas. VFW welcomes the opportunity to discuss these issues with you. Lastly, I close my remarks. I feel it is necessary to remind everyone of our sacred obligation to make sure we never leave a fallen comrade behind. Former President Calvin Coolidge stated, "The nation which forgets its defenders will itself be forgotten." That not only applies to the men and women who made it back home from the fighting overseas, but also those who never made it home. We must continue to fully fund and prioritize DoD's critical mission to make sure all service members who went missing or prisoners of war are recovered and returned with honor in their final resting place on U.S. soil. Moreover, it is imperative that DoD properly recognize the dangerous service of all Americans overseas. I've had the chance to visit with service members around the world over this last year, whether it's alongside DPAA on a mountain in Laos or alongside decision makers and care providers at SHAPE or Landstuhl. I've heard firsthand about the needs of today's force, which is why those who are fighting terrorism in the Middle East or deterring aggression on the eastern flank of NATO deserve proper recognition for their service on behalf of a grateful nation. Chairman Tester and Bost, ranking members Moran and Takano, your committees have done so much over recent years to serve our veterans, culminating with the PAC Act. The VFW thanks you for all your hard work and work yet to come. Thank you for the opportunity to share the VFW's priorities as we enter our next 125 years in service to our veterans. We are eager to answer any questions you may have.
Look what you've started. So there, for the information of the folks on the dais, there'll be 3-minute rounds, and there's going to be a lot of questions to be asked, so try to keep it to that. I'm going to start out, Commander, asking you about mental health. Look, Senator Bozeman and I introduced not just a Numbers Act, requires the VA, as you pointed out in your opening statement, to more closely examine the association between veterans and their benefits and suicide. This bill would have the VA look at the veterans' use of disability compensation, education, employment benefits, home loans, foreclosure assistance, and housing assistance programs. So my question to you is this: how could this analysis of veterans' use of VBA programs improve VA suicide prevention efforts?
No, it's on. Sorry. I never turned it off. I apologize. Chairman, we fully support this. You know, what happens is, and just like I said, when a veteran commits suicide, it's like, when was his last deployment? We need to look at the total package with VHA and VBA. What benefits were they receiving? Because when it's too late, if we're worrying about when their last mental appointment is, it's too late. We have to say, what's the root causes here? You know, suicide and homeless, I gotta be quite honest, Mr. Chairman, a lot of the root causes are the same. You know, when you say, you know, we'd like to have zero veteran homelessness, zero veteran suicide. You know, I think in a perfect world, you're right, that's going to happen. I can tell you as a police officer, if we can save one, if we can look in and help out with their transition, because what causes it? Transition. You know, financial stability, jobs. That's the stat we'll never know, because if they have that, they never get to the end point. But when we look back on the data and see what they received, that's when we can start making a change. And if we can save 1 out of 5, 2 out of 5, that's a home run. That's a home run. And that goes the same for homelessness. It's the same root causes. Because, and I'll be done, and now you got me rattled, and I apologize.
It's okay, you did good. You did good. Thank you. Look, my friend Tim Peters, who's sitting right over there, who's the VFW's junior vice designee, informed me some time ago that veterans are being denied earned VA benefits because of federal government lost their military records through no fault of their own. We recently introduced legislation to address this, named after a Montana veteran by the name of Fred Hamilton, who I believe is here today. And could you tell me, I know the VA supports this bill, could you please discuss how this Fred Hamilton Lost Records Act would improve the claims process for veterans?
Absolutely, I'd love to. And Fred is in the room, I truly believe that, or I know that. So the Fred Hamilton, what you bring up, I mean, veterans are being denied a claim because the VA lost their records. This is a no-brainer. I mean, and I get it. The government's big and bureaucratic. And in the bureaucracy of the government, I understand. And I understand there's got to be tweaks to be made. And I appreciate you putting this in. And I hope this committee forward this out, because when you get down to the bottom line of this, a veteran puts a claim in, they get their medical record and service record, and they deny it because they lost it. That doesn't even make sense to me. But then thank you for taking the initiative on this, and I know this is a no-brainer for the committee, sir.
Thank you, Commander. Chairman Bost.
First off, let me say that there's sometimes that each one of us, that when we deal with government, a lot of things don't make sense to us, okay? That being said, Commander, we know the VFW is a staunch supporter of VA's community care network, but we know some veterans are still waiting too long to get the care they want. What do you think the VA needs to do to improve community care access?
It's an excellent question, Chairman. It's a balancing act with the VA. I use all VA healthcare. I truly do. Everything I do, I use the VA. And there's sometimes I get farmed out in community care. But it's a balancing act. You can't have too much of one. The VA secretary was just briefing us saying, you know, it's in some places leading up to 40% are getting sent out, and even he agrees that that's not right. That we need to, it's a more of a balancing act. Because what happens is, and I talk to veterans all the time, you get sent out to community care, you're on the hook to pay the bill even though the VA sent you because you're the one getting the late notices. Where's my money? Where's my money? And you're being drugged into court because the VA sent you out. There's a fine line here. We have to find it, do this balancing act with it. I mean, community care, we are supportive of it. It does help care, especially in rural areas, sir. But for the veterans to sit there and be billed with late notices, time after time after time, it creates undue stress. And I'm hoping that we can find this balancing act.
You know, I was pleased to be working with Senator Moran, Senator Tester, Speaker Johnson. We were able to get the language of my bill, H.R. 705, to protect the Second Amendment rights for veterans, including the appropriation, included in the appropriations bill. We'll consider this week, and I'm grateful to VFW past support of this issue. Is this something that the VFW will continue to support?
I absolutely guarantee the VFW will continue this support of this. What it does, you know, and sir, you brought it up in the beginning. We're not asking, veterans aren't asking for anything special. All we're asking for is due process that every other agency or any other person that goes through any other service in the federal government gets. Not some a VA administrator deciding, we're taking your guns. All we want is due process. However that plays out, then so be it. But that's all we're asking for, and thank you for spearheading us.
Well, thank you, and my time is running short, and there's a lot of others. Senator Sullivan, I think you're recognized. There you are.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to ask my fellow Alaskans if they're in the audience, if you can stand and be recognized. You know, I think they get. Here we go, and I think they get the award for traveling the furthest. Maybe a little bit dispute with the Hawaiians. But we also get the award, no offense, on Alaska, more veterans per capita. That is a fact. So how about a round of applause for that? All right. And then I was just going to mention, I retired from the Marine Corps last month after 30 years. And so now I take one title, a U.S. Marine, which I'm very proud of, and now another very distinguished title, an American veteran. So I'm very excited about that. Commander, I want to thank you and your team and all the other VSOs. Last year, you might remember, I really focused on this Camp Lejeune issue. It was a priority of so many of our VSOs. We had sick families at Camp Lejeune. We gave them the legislation to get funded to get better. Unfortunately, we had some law firms that wanted to make sure they got the money and not the Marines, the sick Marines. Everybody came out against that. We finally got an executive order saying that there is a cap on attorney's fees, 20 to 25% period. The Attorney General of the United States has said if a law firm charges sick Marines more than that, they will be civilly or criminally liable, okay? Really important. Some of these law firms are charging 60 and 70% contingency fees. It's disgusting. So can I ask you very quickly, and I know when the other VSOs come up, can you make sure that we're still getting the word out to our veterans that there's now a cap? And this is really important. Even if they've already signed a contract with a law firm, 70%, I've asked the Attorney General, that is null and void. And if that law firm tries to charge a family of sick Marines, they could be criminally liable. So can you and are you getting the word out so none of our Marines and their families are getting ripped off by these unscrupulous law firms?
Sir, we are absolutely getting the word out. We raised the alarm on this last year.
I know you
I want to
did.
thank you for spearheading this. Look, we put out to our people. Our VFW actually partnered with some law firms that we already gave us the reduced rate.
Yeah.
Because before this was passed, you're right, 60, 70%. Insanity.
Crazy.
Absolute insanity. And we're glad this has been codified into law. And sir, thank you for being a member of the Veterans of Foreign Wars.
I am.
Yes.
Well, Commander, I have a reputation on this committee of going way over my time, and I think it ticks off a lot of my Senate colleagues. I don't want to tick off the House colleagues. So with 1 second left, I'm going to yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ranking Member Takano, you're recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commander Sarmiento, I know you're not a member of Congress, but in the event you become one, I know you're going to join the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus. So with that, let me just say, I want to thank the VFW for your support for the Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parity Act, and I'm happy to report that Mr. Levin introduced the bill yesterday with Senators Moran and Tester, and I'm happy to support it again this Congress. And I absolutely echo your written testimony that it is beyond time that the National Guard and Reserve service members receive a GI Bill eligibility for the entirety of their time in uniform. So my question to you is this: to be absolutely clear and blunt to the other members of these two committees, when you say in your written testimony that the time is now for parity, are you calling for Guard and Reserve GI Bill parity to be passed in this Congress?
Chairman Takano, yes, we are.
Well, let's get it done.
Absolutely.
Now, let me go on. Your testimony discusses how the social determinants of health are intertwined with veteran suicide prevention work, and you highlight homelessness and financial instability, unemployment, and justice involvement. And I agree with your push to see better data transparency out of VA to address these issues. And I guess what I would ask is how you would respond to politicians who drag their feet in paying for programs in this space or try to cut and defund social safety nets. What are they doing to veterans? Now, as a follow-up, well, let me just ask you about that. What do you think about politicians trying to cut or defund social safety net programs?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to turn that over to our subject matter expert,
Okay, got it.
Pat Murray.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, a lot of these issues require funding, upfront funding and full funding, so that these programs can continue all year long without interruptions. The start-stop of funding affects them, which ultimately trickles down and affects veterans. We need to make sure that these programs continue to be fully funded all year round going forward.
And that includes the social safety net programs like SNAP for
Yes, sir.
veterans. Thank you. And as a follow-up, talking about homelessness programs, Congress, these two committees that are sitting in front of you here today have failed to extend much-needed pandemic-era authorities that were proven to be effective in reducing housing insecurity, while also connecting homeless veterans to health care, appointments, and job interviews. Your testimony mentions H.R. 3848, the HOME Act, which would address these problems. Do you have any thoughts on how Congress should proceed and the effects of the delays in getting this bill to the President's desk on having housing insecure veterans?
Congressman, we're hoping that this moves forward. As you know, the HOME Act increases the maximum rate of per diem to VA providers. It furnishes services for shelters, food, clothing, basic necessities of Americans, especially those that are vulnerable. We fully support this, and we want to get this passed, get it signed, do whatever it is we have to do to take, when we talked about the steps of where do we stop homelessness, this is the beginning steps. These are root causes, all those issues. We're fully behind this.
Well, thank you very much. Let's get it done this Congress. Thank you.
Senator Hassan is now recognized.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and to you and Chairman Tester and our ranking members. Thank you for this hearing. Commander, thank you for your testimony. To all the Granite State VFW and auxiliary members here, thank you for your service. Very proud of our veterans in New Hampshire. And to all the veterans who are here today, regardless of what state you're from, thank you for being here. And to our Vietnam vets in particular, welcome home. Can't say that enough. Commander, in your testimony, you mentioned claim sharks, people who are not accredited benefits agents, but who nonetheless offer to, quote, help veterans file their benefits claims, and then they charge enormous fees. So I'm a strong supporter of the Guard VA Benefits Act that would help crack down on claim sharks who target veterans. But can you just please discuss a little bit more the important role that accredited agents play in helping veterans access benefits and how these claims sharks undermine this important work?
I absolutely love to. The importance of the VSOs, any of the Veteran Service Officers. Number one, it's free.
Yeah.
These claim sharks are breaking the law. And ever since the PACT Act was signed, we never even heard of a claim shark.
Right.
These people came, there's been hustlers and grifters ever since currency was invented. And as soon as the PACT Act came out, all of a sudden we got attorneys that want to get involved. To sit there and prey upon family members that just lost a veteran, to sit there and prey on a vulnerable veteran, that's a shark. That's why we call him a shark. And it's against the law.
Right.
All we're asking is to reinstitute penalties.
Yeah.
Put the penalties back. It's no different. I mean, look, I'm from New Jersey. I get it was
Right.
down here, the crime in D.C. I got the same in New Jersey. If they said carjacking is illegal, but there's no penalty, I'd have to walk everywhere I go in the state of New Jersey.
Right.
That's what, I mean, I hate to use, a very oxymoron like that, but truly, all we're asking is put the penalty back. They prey upon us. It was totally amazing that before the PACT Act was signed, you never heard about this.
Right. Right.
They saw the money, they smelled the blood. And that's why we're against this, ma'am.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that very clear explanation. Very, very clear. I want to move on to one quick topic before my time is up. You mentioned also, Commander, the need for the VA to provide easily accessible health care and counseling for women veterans at all VA locations. To help address issues faced by women veterans, this committee has worked on a bipartisan basis to pass into law several key pieces of legislation. The Deborah Sampson Act that eliminated some of the barriers to care that women veterans encounter, and the Dr. Kate Hendricks Thomas Service Act that expanded eligibility for breast cancer screening. We need to continue building on this work. I am out of time, but I would love it in the course of this discussion this morning, if you can just touch on how we can increase access to care for women veterans and fully integrate them into the VA care.
Man, Pat Murray's testified in front of several subcommittees and committees. I'm going to pass this on to him to make sure you get exactly the answer you want.
With the chair's indulgence,
Oh, I'm
thank you.
sorry. How's it work, sir?
Yeah, thank you. That would be great.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ma'am, one of the things that we're seeing is preventive care is critically important. Things like prenatal vitamins. Veterans who are pregnant are not treated that they're pregnant until they actually are positive. Having access to prenatal vitamins is incredibly important to help prepare healthy bodies for that future next step.
Right. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Tuberville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for being here today. My state of Alabama, we have anybody here? We got a few. Thank you very much. Real quickly, under the Trump administration, there was an evaluation of a lot of people in the VA. It's not just about money. It's not about buildings. It's about people who work in those buildings. 4,000 people were fired for cause. This administration has allowed them to come back with back pay and work in the VAs. It's a disgrace. Do your job or you don't work in the VA. You deserve great care. Great care, not average care. Now, unfortunately, the VA has lost its way under this administration. They've gotten caught up in the border crisis caused by President Biden and his open border policies, while the VA should be leveraging every available resource to ensure timely and quality care to veterans. A section of the VA Financial Service Center helps process health care claims for illegal aliens. VA community care providers are used by the DHS to provide care for illegal aliens. Do you approve, Mr. Chairman, of the Biden administration using the VA and our taxpayer dollars to assist with health care claims processing illegal aliens at ICE detention centers.
Senator, it is our understanding from even going to Chairman Bost's committee and speaking to the VA secretary that there's 10 VA employees on the border processing ICE financial claims. They've been doing this since 2002. Obviously, we are against any, if VA's using resources, medical resources on undocumented immigrants, we're against that. But from our understanding, and if I'm answering your question, Senator, I want to make sure I'm understanding, that we have 10 people, I shouldn't say we, the VA, has, not we, the VA has 10 people down on the border doing medical billing process. And it's not taking away from anything from veterans in the VA, sir.
So that being said, my Bill 3490, the No VA Resources for Illegal Aliens Act, would stop any of this from happening. Would you support that?
I don't believe we've seen that. We have? It's something, if you'd like to speak to our staff here in D.C., sir, we should be willing.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Brownlee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, VFW, for being here. I love the energy in this room and your determination and commitment and advocacy for getting all of this legislation done for our nation's veterans. So thank you very, very much. Mr. Commander, I wanted to thank you for your support for the Elizabeth Dole Home Care Act. And I know that your people testified or sent a statement for the record in front of the House VA Committee, and you wrote about how important this bill is, particularly for our veterans who are experiencing early onset of dementia, which I think is extremely important. I think the Elizabeth Dole bill is very important for our aging veterans. I think the Elizabeth Dole bill is very important for our disabled veterans. So if you could just speak a little bit about why this bill is important and why veterans cannot afford to wait any longer for its enactment.
Thank you, ma'am. The VFW believes it is imperative that we pass this piece of legislation on the caregivers because it's so important. Look around, all the blue hats out here, whether they're male or female, they're family members. They were caregivers before that term even came about. So we support this legislation. We want this to pass. We're hoping that sometimes what happens, as you know better than I do, when we change regulations or we change the law, those already on it, I'm getting kicked off. That we be mindful of that, and we're more than willing to work with you to be sure that doesn't happen, but we're on board with this.
Well, thank you very much. I think Ms. Dole is going to be here later in this meeting, and I just, this is an important bill, and it is, at the end of the day, it is what veterans, I believe, want. And we know that the health outcomes are far better with veterans being taken care of in their homes versus in institutionalized care. So I really, really do appreciate your advocacy around this. So I have very little time left, but I just wanted to address the issues around the challenges, really, that all veterans are experiencing in terms of accessing survivor benefits. And VFW talked about, where Congress should be practicing better oversight around this issue. And I just wanted to say that after we had a hearing in the House, I followed up with Undersecretary Jacob and his team regarding this issue and the DIC application and the fact that it's 20 pages long, very onerous. I looked at it. I mean, I can't do my taxes by myself. God forbid that I could fill out this form by myself. So I think there is a lot of changes that need to be made. And again, I'm running out of time, but appreciate your advocacy around this and really working and engaging with VBA to make sure that they follow suit on this. The Undersecretary has promised me that they are looking at regulatory or statutory changes in this area. So thank you.
Senator Blumenthal, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. as a law enforcement commander, as a law enforcement officer for many years, I appreciated your very direct comments on the need for effective enforcement. And let me talk about the PAC Act in that regard. Too often, there is exploitation of our veterans. I've introduced a measure called the Guard VA Benefits Act. It's bipartisan with Senator Graham and Senator Tester. I wonder if I could ask for the VFW's support for that measure to make sure that individuals accredited by the VA and supported by VSOs are not exploited by individuals promising them that they will get them benefits when all they need to do is apply for those benefits directly.
Sir, we stand behind you about 1,000,000,000%. Matter of fact, we'd love to give you one of our Claim Shark pins if you'd like to wear it that says, "Don't feed the sharks." That's how we're behind that 1,000%. You know, I was speaking earlier about, always got hustlers and grifters, always. That's why we're against this. We provide free, not just us, all the VSOs provide free. Those people sit there and they'll tell you they have a magic wand. I'll guarantee you benefits. You're going to get X amount of dollars. But when the magic don't happen, pay me. That's what they want. Pay me. We got a contract.
I'd be happy to wear the pin, and I also want to thank the VFW and other VSOs for their support for the Afghan Adjustment Act. I've been helping to lead that effort. Two of my sons, one a Marine, the other a Navy SEAL, know firsthand how our at-risk Afghan allies remain in jeopardy, and our veterans have been at the tip of the spear in championing measures that will enable us to give those Afghan at-risk allies a path forward in this country. I'm going to give you a chance to comment in the time that I have left.
We've been supporting this for several years since it brought to the forefront. And earlier on, when the OIF and OEF vets turned up, there's plenty of Afghanistan veterans in this room. They know they worked alongside our allies. Of course, we want to support them the best way we can. Right or wrong, how we left, we ain't here to debate that. But they were our allies, and we're behind this.
Thank you. I want to thank the VFW for all of its service, very often underappreciated by our veterans, but just absolutely vital. And to everyone in this room and to the many who are not here today, thank you for your continuing service. After you wear the uniform, you continue to make this country the greatest in the world. Thank you to all of you. And I don't know whether we have anyone from Connecticut here, but thank you all. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Pappas.
Thank you very much, Chairman Bost. Just want to recognize all the veterans from the Live Free or Die state of New Hampshire who are joining us here today. Met with them last night in my office. Really appreciative of the priorities that you bring to me each and every time. Also appreciative of the Claim Shark pin that you gave me last night. So thanks very much for all of your work. I wear it proudly. And Commander, I don't want to beat a dead shark here, but I do want to continue to highlight the need for the Guard VA Benefits Act, and no one could say it better than you did in your opening testimony. And I just applaud VFW for your continued work here in going after these unaccredited representatives that are engaging in predatory practices and are taking advantage of our veterans. It's really important, especially as we sit in this big room with so many folks that have served our country in a variety of different ways, to understand that we work for you, that VA works for you, and that it's so critical that we have protections and teeth to the law to make sure that no one is ripping off our veterans. We've got to make sure that we strengthen the accreditation process and ensure that everyone is going through it who is assisting veterans with their claims. I've talked to a number of constituents that have been caught up in this. They've reported that they have been paying an arm and a leg to these claim sharks companies for things and services that are offered for free by VSOs, including VFW. It's one of the reasons why I'm continuing to push in a bipartisan, bicameral fashion for this Guard VA Benefits Act. As you said, Commander, this would just reinstate the criminal penalties, which were taken away somehow a few years back, and would make sure that anyone who's assisting veterans with claims has to go through this accreditation process and abide by the law. And it's really important that there's some enforcement capability here, because right now, when a claim sharks company is charging veterans whatever they want, there's no recourse. This can be reported and flagged for VA, but there's no way that the government can go after these bad actors. So that's what this is all about. And so, Commander, maybe I could get at this from a different way. There's a competing proposal that's on the table, a bill called the PLUS Act, and it's supported by a lot of these. It has support from a lot of these claim sharks companies and lobbyists who have been having a flurry of meetings here on the Hill. Could you talk a little bit about concern that the VFW has for that legislation? Because I see this as sort of legitimizing predatory practices and opening the tent to those who are currently violating the law. But maybe I could get your take on that, Bill.
So the PLUS Act that you mentioned, you know, the major competing companies that are the sharks wrote the bill. And what is pretty offending, at least not from a veteran, but not for you, but to read this, is they wrote it in a way that, yes, we'll make it illegal for the other people, but it's okay for us. But anybody comes behind us, we're good. And they put in a law for those that haven't jumped on board yet and to get grandfathered in, that it's illegal for them, and yes, put them in jail or do whatever you do to them. This is, everybody here knows, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir. Everybody got the pins on and we love it. We know how important this is. We know the money they're throwing at this. Look, we're veterans. We don't have no money to do that. We're thankful you allow us to come here and speak and give us our feelings and give us what our beliefs are. You allow us to come into your office and talk to you and your staff personally. That's what we do. But we don't have money to throw at this like they got. And I want to thank you for holding the line. Thank you so much for that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your advocacy on the state level, but we can't let Congress off the hook. We need to pass this at the federal level. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Senator Rano, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Aloha to all of you who are here, all of the veterans organizations. Thank you very much for all that you do for our country and what you've done. I particularly, of course, want to give a big shout out to the veterans who have come all the way from Hawaii. They probably came the farthest from Hawaii. Where are you guys? All right. Big shout out to you. And I know that we cover a lot of issues for the veterans, but I have to say that I sit on 5 committees in the Senate, and the Veterans Committee is one that really is characterized by bipartisanship. And that is why we are able to get a lot done that reflects our support for the veterans, and especially as we see more women who are serving now and more female veterans, and the particular, I think, needs of the women veterans are being met by all of you. And I know that all of you, by the way, where is the women? Where are the women who are going to be testifying? Yay, big shout out to you folks, that there is support all around for to make sure that we are meeting the particular health care and other needs of the women veterans. So thank you very much for all of you being here, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Leo.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Well, I'm excited to see some fellow VFW members in the crowd. I suspect I got some Pennsylvanians in the house. Are anybody here? Okay, here we go. We can beat the dead shark. I'm game with that. Commander, I'm surprised you're able to keep it from swearing talking about these guys. I heard hustlers and grifters. Okay. I'll ask an easy question. And I know the answer because I used a VFW, VSO when I did my claims to the VA. What do you charge?
Sir, free.
Exactly right. And look, I think that's an important message that my fellow veterans maybe don't know, right? Is that there are folks who will help you do this for free. It's not just the VFW. There are plenty of VSOs who will serve veterans and help them navigate benefits they've earned, right? That's what we're talking about. That's part of the obligation this country has to everyone who wears the uniform, peace, war, whatever. You've earned those benefits. It comes from your service. No one should hesitate coming to the VA to get it. So that's all I want to say. I'm with you in this fight. We got to take on these sharks. We've got bipartisan buy-in. I hope to get this done, and we're with you as long as it takes. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, everybody here. I have to do the obligatory. Either live in or have spent some time in North Carolina. Can you raise your hand? There you go. Thank you all for being here. Just very brief. Commander, in your opening statement, I was here for that. We were talking about veteran suicide. And I think you're right. You were saying, excuse me, if you could reduce 1 out of 5, that's 4 a day. 2 out of 5 is 10 a day. It's a big number over time. The concern that I have is that the majority of them are not connected to the VA. More than half of them are not connected to the VA today. And one of the things that I've been trying to preach, and hopefully I think that you all have reviewed it and you're okay with it, the Veterans Bill of Rights, which is for these people who are going out there and convincing them to, these attorneys basically taking exorbitant fees to actually represent them for Camp Lejeune Toxics Act. I want them to read a statement to them or give them a statement that says, do you realize that you don't have to pay a dime to apply for this? Do you realize that there are VSOs out there that will do it for free? Do you realize that you have congressional offices that are also tasked with doing this every day? Until you've exhausted all these possibilities, which will not cost you a dime and net you more benefits, do you really want to sign this agreement with an attorney? I'm going to try to do my best to get that done quickly. Here's the main, I want to do it to protect the veteran and not to have these people rip off qualified veterans. But I also want to do it because I believe in my heart of hearts with all of this advertising, these damn ads are driving me crazy, but with all these advertising that's going on right now, maybe it's a way to actually get some of those people who are not connected to the VA connected. If they see that they have these rights, if they see that they can call a congressional office, what do you think about the Veterans Bill of Rights, and what do you all think we should do just to get it done?
Sir, I'm going to pass this off to Pat Murray, our legislative director.
Senator, we support this proposal fully. I think what we can get it done, bring it down to the floor, hotline it, I don't know, after lunch. But what we want to do is continue banging that drum that it's not just the free option. There's an entire network out there.
100%.
It's VSOs, it's county,
Well,
it's state,
that's why
it's
in the
everybody.
Bill of Rights, that's what I'm saying. Here, we can work on the wording, but here are all the resources that you have as a veteran that you should exhaust before you sign a retainer for a law firm is more interested in what they get at the end of the day than doing right by the veterans.
Sir, you are absolutely right. There is an abundance of choice already out there, and we want veterans to go to that first.
Well, we'd like you all's feedback on maybe some of the details of the Bill of Rights, but I think it helps us. I think it puts these folks in their place, and I think it gets more veterans connected, which gets to a key problem that I want is fewer men and women taking their lives every day. We need to help them. Thank you all.
Representative McGarvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we have any veterans here who are ever stationed in or live in Kentucky now, we're glad to have you all here. So thank you for being here. Commander Sarmiento, thank you so much. You know, people sometimes tell me they have a hard time understanding what's going on in Washington. I hope they listen to your testimony because there is no doubt. We appreciate it, both your thoughtfulness and your candor in that regard. I'm truly inspired listening to so many of these stories, observing the strength and the passion with which you all advocate for our nation's veterans, the men and women who are willing to put on a uniform and sacrifice everything to keep this country safe. Your expertise empowers us and the committee members to work together and to do all we can to ensure access to the benefits and the services that veterans and their families have earned. So again, I thank you guys for being here. You mentioned in your testimony today several quality of life issues, which I like to call social determinants of health, that affect veterans and their families. It's issues like transitioning out of the military, food security, housing, employment, transportation, childcare. The list goes on and on and on. I believe this committee and the VA can and must do better to address social determinants, which we know are significantly tied to health outcomes. These issues don't exist in silos. They all affect veterans' health. So I think we got to start treating them that way. Commander Sarmiento, I'm getting my question here. The existing benefits and approaches are often disparate and require veterans or spouses to navigate several separate and unconnected programs, which can be confusing and overwhelming. It seems our current system doesn't approach health from a holistic perspective. Do you think it would improve veteran health if the VA treated resources like transportation, childcare, employment, and stable access to food and housing as part of a holistic approach to veterans' health?
Yes. The answer, the simplest, sir, the simplest is absolutely yes. And I think that starts, we talked about the TAP Promotion Acts. When you do the transition, once that act's in, now you're exiting the military. It starts there. Then it trans off with a handoff to the VA. And if we can get everybody talking and on the same page, it's a win-win. Sometimes you're right, and government gets siloed. Yep. The VA's here, DOD's here, other people are here, and I don't work for you, you don't work for me. If we can just get people talking and ease the transition of everything you said, it's simple. It sounds simple, I know. Look, you know better than me. It sounds simpler than it is. Yeah. But we're willing to work on this, and we believe starting with the TAP Promotion Act, when you're exiting the military, to do a handoff to the VA.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate all your service, and Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Representative Rosendale, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you everyone for coming in and attending today. Commander Sarmiento and the rest of the veterans of foreign wars of the United States for coming to Washington, D.C. to testify today. I look forward to having representatives from the Montana chapter of the VFW in my office later today, and I always appreciate your perspectives and insight on all the veterans' issues. In your written testimony today, you stated adopting a value-based healthcare model would allow for a patient system-centered system that aligns with the VA's whole healthcare approach. Helping lead the charge on a bill that would establish a pilot program to allow veterans to receive a health savings account and use the money to obtain medical services through a direct primary care arrangement. The legislation would make it easier for veterans to see their doctor and spend money on preventative measures to improve their health before getting sick. I was the insurance commissioner of Montana from 2016 until 2020, and I'm proud to say that I was able to get authorized direct primary care agreements between private individuals and doctors, physicians, for a very low cost. And not only have we received incredible response from the patients themselves, but from the doctors that are delivering that care. They have a much more close and intimate relationship with the physicians. So it has been working out extremely well for everyone involved, and has been able to address some of these issues that are chronic conditions like high blood pressure and diabetes, so that we make sure that we have a good maintenance program in place. What I would like to ask Commander Sarmiento is, what ideas do you have to make the care at the VA more patient-centric?
So I'm going to pay our executive director definitely a little better than this than I am.
Okay.
I'm going to pass this off to Ryan so I don't sit here with an answer and try to dance around you and go, obviously you want your question answered.
Perfect.
Well, thank you, Commander-in-Chief, and thank you, Mr. Rosendale, for the question. The VFW has had a lot of discussion on this very issue. Now first, to be perfectly frank, when Phoenix happened in almost a decade ago, we were out there saying, look, community care is part of VA care, and that's very important. What we've seen over the last 10 years is you've had the Choice Program, now you have Mission Acts, you've had other programs here or there. One thing, here's what I'm concerned about. The Secretary talks about how much VA is spending on community care, but you look at how much of that is emergency room care. That is the most expensive and most fractured care that a veteran can receive. Some of the things that we've talked about with Dr. El Nahal and VHA and even the Secretary is you need to lean on your third-party administrators. You need to lean on your third-party administrators heavily so that you're integrating this community care into VA care when a veteran has chosen VA as their care provider. We're pushing that very hard because the last thing we need is veterans showing up at emergency rooms receiving that fractured care. We think there are ways to do this and would be eager to work with you and the committees to address that.
Thank you very much. And again, I think that we can establish this relationship. We have a maintenance program that we can avoid crisis situations for our veterans in the future. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Senator King.
Commander, I wish you'd quit beating around the bush, man. We've gotten less bullshit from you today than any witness I've ever heard. And man, we see a lot of that. So anyway, it seems to me one of the themes here is common sense. Richard Starr Act. You earn two separate benefits, you should get them, period. Richard Starr, common sense. Here's the other one. One of the first hearings, I'm on Armed Services and Veterans Affairs, so I see this from both sides. One of the first hearings I was in Armed Services 10 years ago, I made the statement, I said, why don't we spend as much money on transition as we do on recruiting? In other words, let's take care of those veterans when they're coming out. And of course, the third common sense is the GUARD Act. Why are we allowing people to take money out of the pockets of veterans when you guys can do it more effectively for free? So let me talk about transition for a minute. Transition is statistically one of the most dangerous moments for veterans. That's where there's a high level of suicide, a high level of homelessness. It's a real problem. So a couple of bills. The Welcome Home Veterans Act. One of the problems is when you sign all those paperworks at the TAP, there's one little box about opting in to notify the state veteran agency. I want to change that to an opt-out because right now only 13% of veterans are known to their state agency. My vision is let's get the names to the state agency, they get the names to the VA. I want a couple of you guys or women meeting the veteran at the airport when they arrive home. So do you support the Welcome Home Veterans Act?
Yes, we do, sir. That's a common sense approach to a problem that probably got incurred by just not oversight, but overlooked. We just overlooked. To opt out, that's no brainer.
And then we'll get people names so they can be met and get the services they need right away. Second one is the TAP Promotion Act. You've already mentioned that. Make VA accredited representatives like yourself at the TAP day before people leave. You're for that, I take it.
We are all in on the TAP Promotion Act.
That's good. All right. The third one is the Combat Veterans Pre-Enrollment Act, so that a combat veteran can enroll in the VA healthcare before they leave their service so they get the care they need from the VA on day one. Are you in on that one?
Yes, sir. We are in on that one as well.
Well, you got it, man. Let's get this done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I want to thank Senator King for saying what we all feel. Of course, there's a statement in deep southern Illinois, we appreciate you putting the cabbage down where the hogs can eat it. So, but
what does that make us, Mr. Chairman?
Well, I thought Chairman Tester demoted you by calling you a member of Congress. So, but we do want to say thank you to the VFW for sharing this 2024 legislative priorities, and to all the veterans and families and caregivers and survivors that are in attendance here today. Now we're going to switch over to our next panel, which will be Elizabeth Dole, and Senator Dole is going to address us, but we're going to take a 15-minute break, and then we'll reconvene. I'd like to take a moment, if we can, to recognize a very special guest and allow her to give a few remarks. Senator Elizabeth Dole, welcome. Thank you for... Agree. We want to thank you for being with us today, for your tireless work to provide veterans and their caregivers the support they deserve. And the floor is yours. Mike, I think your microphone there.
Chairman Tester, Chairman Bost, Ranking Member Moran, Ranking Member Takano, Congressman Brownlee. Thank you for that wonderful, warm welcome. And thank you for inviting me to speak in support of legislation that I believe to be a lifeline for America's veterans and their caregivers. I'm grateful to our many partners here today showing their support for this important legislation, particularly my good friend, General Mike Lennington. Mike, I know this is your last hearing as CEO of Wounded Warrior Project. Thank you for being a transformative leader and advocate, a true partner, and for the immeasurable difference you have made in the lives of so many veterans and caregivers. Yes. Serving as a United States Senator was one of the greatest honors of my life. And my beloved husband, Bob, served in these chambers for 35 years. While we never thought Washington should attempt to fix all the nation's problems, we firmly believe that some of America's greatest challenges could only be solved with the leadership, power, and resources entrusted to you, our elected representatives. I'm truly honored that the Omnibus of Veterans Bills and the Act for Veteran Caregivers are named for me, though I certainly don't feel worthy. I'm even more grateful for the promises they hold for those who protect our freedom and our security and their caregivers. The resources, reforms, and improvements contained in this legislation are precisely the types of advancements that only this body can provide. And I don't see how we can be a nation that truly cares for our military and veteran communities if we wait another day to get this legislation passed. Yes. The Elizabeth Dole Home Care Act, in particular, is bipartisan legislation that will make it possible for severely injured veterans to spend more time recovering at home with their families, rather than in an institutional setting. I think of Americans like Laura and Tom Gary and their son Trey from Texas. Tom was an Air Force veteran who tragically passed away last year due to his service-connected ALS. Like so many veterans, Tom wanted to be home with his family for as long as possible. As his condition deteriorated, Laura had to fight to get the appropriate support in their home, so Tom could continue to enjoy family movie nights and even attend his son Trey's makeshift high school graduation in their living room. He would have missed all of this if he had been housed in the closest medical facility, which was 2 hours away. By easing access to necessary programs and services, this legislation will make the very difficult path of the Garys and so many others much easier. It will allow veterans and caregivers to focus on the things that really matter. You know, Bob and I always said that the most meaningful change happens when our leaders work across the aisle, at a time when compromise and consensus are hard to come by. You, your colleagues, and your staff have done it. You have come together to create a significant package of legislation that will impact thousands of veterans and caregivers' lives for the better. Now I urge you to remain united, to continue to put veterans and caregivers first, and to pass these bills. This community has earned it, and they desperately need your bipartisan leadership to accomplish it. Thank you all for your consideration, and a special thanks to the MSO and VSO leaders we work with every day to support our nation's veterans, their caregivers, and their military children. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Are you getting that, Dennis? Okay.
Thank you, Senator Dole. Now, on our second panel, we have multiple veteran service and advocacy organizations that are represented and assist in diverse cross-section of veterans from around the country. First, we'll start with Robert Thomas. It's the National President of Paralyzed Veterans of America. We have, up next, we have General Mike Lennington, Chief Executive Officer of Wounded Warrior Projects, and as was mentioned, I hear he will be retiring at the end of this month. So we want to take a minute to say thank you for his hard work. We appreciate that. We also, General, you have been working greatly on advocacy on behalf of the nation's wounded warriors, and for all your work, you should be celebrated, and the committee really does appreciate what you've done with there. Next, we have Dennis Weimer, President of the National Association of State Directors of Veterans Affairs. Next up is Jim Wally, Chief Executive Officer for Mission Roll Call. Next up is Kathy Roth, I want to say it right, Duquette? Duque, Chief Executive Officer, Blue Star Families. Next up, Allison Jaslow, Chief Executive Officer for Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. Next also, we have Paul Mims, National President for the Blind Veterans Association. And next, Colonel Lori Fiedner, Director of the Government Relations for Service Women's Action Network. We also have on the panel Jared Lyon, National President and Chief Executive Officer of the Student Veterans of America. And last but definitely not least, we have William Bill Clark, National Commander of AMVETS. Thank you all for being here. Mr. Thomas, you're recognized for your opening statement.
Chairman Tester, Chairman Bost, and members of the committees, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today on behalf of the tens of thousands of veterans with spinal cord injuries and disorders who heavily rely on the benefits and health care available through the VA. The VA is the best health care provider for veterans with catastrophic disabilities. The department's SEID system of care provides a coordinated, lifelong continuum of services. There is no comparable private system of care in the community. Thus, preserving and strengthening VA's specialty care system remains the highest priority for PVA, as it should be for you. Despite the Veterans Health Administration's hiring successes last fiscal year and the flexibility gained by the workforce provisions approved by previous Congress, staffing levels within the SEID system of care are not improving. We continue to see the same staffing deficiencies at the SEID centers year after year, which affects everything from the quality of care received to employee safety and well-being at these facilities. We are extremely concerned with the VHA's decision to severely limit hiring in 2024. I urge you to monitor the hiring practices closely so veterans are not adversely affected. Another pressing need for PVA's members is increased access to VA's home and community-based services. As eloquently discussed by Senator Elizabeth Dole, passing her namesake legislation, the Elizabeth Dole Home Care Act, would make critically needed improvements to VA's home and community-based services, such as lifting the department's cap on the amount they can pay for home care, increasing access to the Veteran-Directed Care Program, and improving support to caregivers of veterans. The story of Andrew, an Air Force veteran who has ALS, and his wife, Lisa, illustrates why this legislation must pass now. Andrew is currently bedbound, paralyzed, vent-dependent, and nonverbal. Lisa has had to work hard to secure the equipment and services needed to keep her husband alive and comfortable at home. Recently, they had to give up the veteran-directed care in lieu of the family caregiver program because expenses related to Andrew's care were projected to exceed the cap later this year. This unnecessary disruption in the continuity of his care highlights the urgent need to eliminate the cap. I understand the provisions of the Elizabeth Dole Home Care Act are included in a larger package of legislation that is currently being considered by Congress. I cannot stress enough how important it is to get these provisions enacted into law now. Andrew and his family can't wait longer for the care he needs. Other veterans with SCID need to receive care at a specialized long-term care facility. Despite the grave need, the department's capacity to provide such care is extremely limited. There are currently only 6 VA SCID long-term care facilities. Thus, veterans continue to remain in acute settings for months or years at a significantly greater cost because other placements, including the community, are simply not available. We call on Congress to mitigate the shortage of long-term care beds by funding the 6 construction projects identified in my written statement and ensure existing facilities are fully staffed. Finally, neurogenic bladder and bowel dysfunction are common conditions among veterans with SCID, and they can lead to complications, rehospitalizations, and even death. Therefore, managing them requires ongoing specialized attention. The VA can train and reimburse designated caregivers to provide this critical care. But the department's current bowel and bladder program is fraught with problems like reimbursement delays. It lacks due process for the veteran, and unlike virtually all other VA payments, it imposes tax burdens on family caregivers. Harry Robinson, caregiver for his wife, PVA National Vice President Ann Robinson, pays about $3,500 a year in self-employment taxes out of his reimbursement for providing her with this life-sustaining care. Allowing family members to provide bowel and bladder care leads to better outcomes for the veterans and saves the VA money. But Congress must reduce the burden of providing care for veterans' caregivers. Codifying the bowel and bladder program will allow Congress to address the tax burden and make other needed improvements. In closing, I would like to note that these are just a few of the many issues affecting catastrophically disabled veterans. Others include the need for improved travel support to help veterans receive needed medical care, increase HISA grant rates to provide critical housing modifications, and better access to inpatient mental health care and substance use disorder treatment for veterans with SCID. Information about these and other issues of importance to paralyzed veterans are included in my written statement. Thank you again for this opportunity to share our views and your commitment to paralyzed veterans and their caregivers. I will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. General Lennington, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chairman Tester and Bost, ranking members Moran and Takano, distinguished committee members. Thank you for today's hearing. And let me thank Senator Dole for her gracious remarks. She remains a friend, a mentor, a role model, and really the epitome of a selfless servant leader. So thank you, Senator Dole, for your remarks. I'd like to begin by thanking many of you and your staffs for meeting with our Wounded Warrior Project alumni this week to discuss our highest legislative priorities. These men and women in the black polos behind me are the best messengers for insight about how we can assist post-9/11 veterans in your states and districts. Wounded Warrior Project has been serving wounded warriors across the country for more than 20 years, interacting with thousands of warriors daily and helping them lead healthy, fulfilled, and empowered lives in the communities you represent. They are the voice of post-9/11 veterans on Capitol Hill, and we are humbled to bring them to Washington, D.C. with us this week. My remarks today will be short, capturing the highlights of our written testimony submitted last week and in support of our 2024 Ledge priorities. Our priorities are informed by our unwavering commitment to honor and empower wounded warriors, commitment that led us to provide over 66,000 hours of mental health treatment in our last fiscal year alone. That drove us to deliver more than 240,000 hours of in-home and local care for the most severely wounded warriors, increasing their independence. And what inspired us to run over 7,800 events across the country, connecting warriors and their families to each other and the resources they need to thrive in the communities where they live and work. And while we empower millions, we also recognize far too many post-9/11 veterans are continuing to struggle with mental health challenges, including depression, anxiety, and PTSD related to their service. For some, Wounded Warrior Project has been a critical stop on their journey of healing and recovery, and importantly, a critical link to VA resources designed to help those with the greatest mental and brain health needs. It's why our first call to action is improving access to VA's mental health residential rehabilitation treatment programs, or RRTP. As we've shared at previous oversight hearings, VA's Mission Act-derived access standards do not extend to these critical inpatient programs. Instead, veterans and their advocates are left to interpret a VHA directive that, in our judgment, provides little predictability about the course of their treatment and their options for care along the way. Unless Congress or VA act to address this policy gap, many of our veterans will continue to face obstacles in connecting to the care they need, placing them at heightened risk for negative outcomes the longer they wait for treatment. We appreciate the committee's oversight on this issue and the introduction of legislation, including the Making Community Care Work for Veterans Act, the Veterans Health Act, and the Veteran Care Improvement Act that would address this issue. Ensuring that a single solution is included in the forthcoming Elizabeth Dole Omnibus Act is indeed our highest priority. Our second legislative priority pertains to helping women veterans with access to care and employment. Continued oversight of the Deborah Sampson Act implementation is still critical, particularly on matters relating to women's health staffing and child care that make VA a more attractive option for care. Exploring new opportunities like extended clinic hours and cultural competency training for all VA staff will also help. In that vein, we encourage support for H.R. 5785, the Edith Norris Rogers STEM Scholarship Improvement Act, which would expand education opportunities for all veterans, but be particularly impactful for women veterans. Sadly, the unemployment rate for Wounded Warrior Project women warriors is 4 times higher than the U.S. veteran population, and nearly half reported living paycheck to paycheck. We can do more, surely, to help these women find good-paying jobs in the growing STEM fields, and supporting H.R. 5785 would help make an underutilized VA program more accessible to women. Similarly, we are prioritizing warriors' financial well-being and join many of our VSO colleagues and members of Congress by offering our strongest support for the Major Richard Starr Act, which would end the offset of military retirement pay against VA disability compensation for veterans who were medically retired for combat-related injuries before they reached 20 years of service. This is one of the most well-known bills in Congress and in the veteran community, and I appreciate Chairman Tester's press conference yesterday with several of the VSO, MSO partners in support of this legislation, and certainly Tanya Starr's presence was also notable. I'd also like to highlight, however, a few less known bills that would help place more veterans into federal jobs that value their military experience. The Grow for Our Veterans Act, the Employing Veterans to Feed America Act, and the Veterans Border Patrol Training Act would create new and creative opportunities for veterans at the Departments of Interior, Ag, Homeland Security, and they all have our full support. Finally, as I close, I'd like to share that working with Congress and your committee has made our work of honoring and empowering wounded warriors even more impactful. Looking back on our collaboration on legislation like the Mission Act, which expanded the Caregiver program to all generations, the John Scott Hannon Act, which expanded VA's investment in community organizations that help prevent veteran suicide, and the PAC Act, which represents the largest expansion of health care and benefits for toxic exposed veterans, all give me hope. Hope that anything is possible when we work together in honoring those who have served and sacrificed on our behalf. And I, too, look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General. Mr. Weimer, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Tester, Chairman Bost, ranking members Moran and Takano, and distinguished members of the Committees on Veterans Affairs. And I'd like to thank Representative Mervan from Indiana for being on this committee and being here today. Thank you, sir. My name is Dennis Weimer, and I am the president of the National Association of State Directors of Veterans Affairs. I also have the honor to serve as the director of the Indiana Department of Veterans Affairs. NASDVA was founded 78 years ago to bring together the VA state directors, commissioners, and secretaries from all 50 states, 5 U.S. territories, and the District of Columbia with the mission to foster effective representation for those claiming entitlements due to their honorable service, to provide a medium for the exchange of ideas and information and facilitate discussion, and to successfully advocate for our nation's veterans, their families, survivors, and caregivers. State departments of Veterans Affairs are comprehensive service providers. We serve our respective veterans as the primary intersection on veterans issues between the United States Department of Veterans Affairs and our respective state and territory governments, as well as with veteran service organizations, community partners, and nonprofit entities. In doing so, we closely partner with federal VA to deliver both federal and state services while conducting aggressive outreach and advocacy for our nation's 18+ million veterans. The collaborative relationship between the VA and NASDVA was just recently reinforced with the renewal of the Memorandum of Understanding signed last week with Secretary Dennis McDonough at our Midwinter Training Conference here in DC. Secretary McDonough told us, VA and our veterans have no better partner than NASDVA. It is our privilege to be partners with all of you. As an association, we applaud Congress's concerted efforts to improve VA funding for healthcare benefits, claims and appeals processing, and homeless veterans programs. We specifically ask that you support the cohort of 50,000 plus combat injured veterans who were medically retired prior to 20 years of service to receive their earned retired pay without offset of VA disability compensation. Your passage of the PACT Act was a monumental piece of legislation. NASDVA supports current emphasis on the implementation and the hiring of adequate VA staff to address the resulting increases in medical examinations and services and disability claims processing. States perform a vital role interfacing with the veterans to inform and help with their individual needs and claims. It will take time to address the resultant backlog. NASDVA applauds Congress's renewed attention on VA's aging infrastructure, on caregiver support, and on women veterans issues. Also, we applaud VA increasing its digital connection with veterans, particularly for health appointments, prescriptions, and claim status. We also agree with your efforts to hold VA fully accountable for development and evolutionary upgrades to the VA's electronic health record modernization. It is essential for future healthcare transformation. We also recommend continued emphasis by the VA to ensure veterans are provided timely community care referrals and appointments. Reimbursements to providers for community care services should also be prompt. In promoting our state and territories' collective veteran suicide efforts, NASDVA recommends additional resources be provided through the Governor's and Mayor's Challenge on veteran suicide prevention. For our state's veterans' homes, both NASDVA and the National Association of State Veterans Homes recommend increased funding for the VA State Veteran Home Construction Grant Program and an increase in per diem to enhance care in view of the national shortages of healthcare professionals. The Build America, Buy America Act is presenting some challenges in the acquiring of certain materials for the construction of homes where they are not available or more costly. For those state veterans home projects granted prior to enactment of the law, we are seeking waivers from VA under provisions stated in the law where items are unavailable or too costly. Additionally, VA's current Veteran Cemetery Grants Program budget does not allow the NCA to adequately cover both the establishment of new state or tribal cemeteries while giving priority to the expansion and improvement of existing cemeteries. Both state veteran nursing homes and state veteran cemeteries provide essential health care and memorial services to honor those who have served in the defense of our nation. To serve eligible American and Alaska Native veterans, NASDVA applauds the MOU between the VA and Indian Health Service and supports the rule by VA to waive the co-payments incurred by these veterans. The recent passage of legislation for the National Association of Indian Veterans as a chartered VSO gives proper recognition for these deserving warriors. NASDVA commends VA's emphasis on ending homelessness among veterans, especially women veterans with children. NASDVA recommends continued funding for specialized homeless programs and commends VA and HUD for increasing the number and value of HUD-VASH vouchers. It is a significant challenge, as we've heard, for transitioning service members to connect with earned state services, benefits, and support. NASDA applauds the Veterans Benefit Administration allowing accredited VSO and states to have a 45-minute inclusion in the DoD Transition Assistance Program. It is also important that we be allowed to receive information and connect with service members retiring and separating who are coming to our respective states. It is extremely important that we recognize and honor the service of our Guardsmen and Reservists, particularly with the increased and vital role they perform, not only at the state level, but in the overall defense of our nation. Finally, it is important to highlight that NASDAVA's membership are government-to-government partners with federal VA, and that we are second only to federal VA in delivery of earned benefits and services. Distinguished committee members, we sincerely respect and appreciate your work to improve the well-being of our nation's veterans. With your help and your continued support, we can ensure that our veterans remain a national priority. Thank you.
Mr. Weimer, thank you. And Mr. Whaley, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairmans Tester and Bost, ranking members Moran and Takano, and distinguished members of the House Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, on behalf of Mission Roll Call, a national nonpartisan 501c3, and roughly the 1.4 million veterans we support, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Jim Whaley. I recently came on board as Mission Roll Call's Chief Executive Officer. I'm a retired U.S. Army officer, married to an Army veteran, and a father of 3 daughters, 2 of which are currently serving overseas on active duty, and the others serving active duty soldiers and their families at a nonprofit. My family and I are committed to the cause of serving those who served, which is why I was drawn to the vision of Mission Roll Call. Mission Roll Call brings a unique and dynamic process to veteran advocacy. We seek to give veterans an unfiltered voice and give policymakers an unbiased view of how veteran community feels about issues under consideration by this body. Mission Roll Call is a new organization that uses the power of technology to represent and advocate for our veterans and their families. We are a movement providing veterans with a powerful, unified voice that is heard by our nation's leaders and communities. We are apolitical and represent the concerns that our veterans have across the nation. We believe that every veteran has a voice that needs to be heard. Almost half of all 18 million veterans within this country are not associated with any veteran service organization or the VA, which means when our leaders are talking about veterans issues, half of our voices are not being heard. On a regular basis, we ask relevant and timely questions through polls and then share that with elected officials, policymakers, and the media. We believe using the opinions of veterans and their families is a powerful tool to bring to the attention of the American people and demand action by decision makers in government. We have had over 260,000 veterans and their families respond to our polls, and we expect to double that number this year. Our polls address the subjects that are interests of our members, the veterans and their families. Our recent polls range from addressing the level of support from the Veterans Administration, suicide prevention, mental health issues, food insecurity concerns, and the continuing struggle for a successful transition to civilian life, as well as the upcoming presidential elections. We will share the direct impact of the polls and petitions with all of you. We also want the country to know our veterans and what's important to them. So we're traveling the country in person and virtually to speak with veterans and share their stories. Our strength is in our numbers and our voice being amplified over many social media platforms. Through our Service to Service initiative, we will provide our veteran community access through podcasts, videos, and articles to address the challenges and concerns they are experiencing and give them access to success stories, programs, and insightful discussion from other veteran support organizations, business leaders, and veteran entrepreneurs. Ensuring successful transition, providing necessary health care benefits, stopping suicide are all more than just moral imperatives. Success or failure in these areas has a direct impact on national security. In one of our recent surveys, we asked the American people if they would recommend military service to a young family member. Only 35% of those adults without a military connection responded positively. Among those who would not recommend it, nearly 40% cited transition issues, 60% cited insufficient veterans benefits and concerns about VA health care. Fewer than 1% of Americans serve on active duty in any given year, and of the estimated 18 million veterans in the U.S., 80% report having an immediate family member who has served. Taken together, this means military service has become a family business, being shouldered by a shrinking minority of American families. We need to understand that the quality of life of those on active duty, when 24% suffer from food insecurity challenges, according to the DoD, coupled with the lack of confidence in VA support, is a national security threat in an ever-dangerous world. Congress and the VA play an important part to make sure veterans have the support, and the VSOs in this room play a major part in ensuring they have the community. We must work collaboratively across party lines in conjunction with a coalition of veteran support groups to ensure success. Together, we can help veterans continue their service, being after the military in their community, states, and in their country. Mission Roll Call is proud to be part of this effort, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you for this opportunity and open to any questions.
Thank you. Ms. Roth-Duquet.
Thank you, Chairman Tester and Bost, Ranking Members Moran and Takano, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity, our first opportunity at Blue Star Families, to present our priorities. We're the nation's largest and fastest growing military and veteran family support organization. Many of you have loved ones who serve or have served in the military, so you are Blue Star Families, and we're delighted to see you. We have, we're growing to 15 chapters across the states, 275,000 members. Our programs touch 1.5 million individuals each year. Our annual Military Family Lifestyle Survey, which is developed with Syracuse University's IVMF, is the largest and most comprehensive of its time for active Guard and Reserve veterans and their families. Today, I want to share with you some of our main topics of concern relevant to the committee: suicide prevention, toxic exposure, education, and transition. So in terms of suicide prevention, there's a clear need for support, mental health support for veterans. And given the barriers to accessing mental health resources and the tendency of veteran families to turn to informal sources, it's very important that we elevate the less formal mental health supports, such as wellness centers, chaplains, and especially friends and families, because this is how people live. These supports do not replace mental health care, but they can support and extend if families and friends are educated and resourced about how to talk to someone about their mental health. So we were very pleased that in 2022, Blue Star Families was awarded the Staff Sergeant Fox Suicide Prevention Grant. While most suicide prevention programs for the VA focus only on the veteran and are eligible only to the veteran, this is really a revolutionary program because it's a national program that focuses on the family members as key points of intervention, and it's working. This matters because the family member is often the one who sees the crisis. Often the veteran is not willing to raise their hand for help. Excluding anyone but the veteran is a mistake. So with our grant, we provide a community-based outreach prevention program. It's called Support Circles. We empower the friends and families, loved ones of veterans, to recognize and intervene before the struggle becomes a crisis. It's an upstream solution. This program offers facilitated, non-clinical, closed group cohorts for supporters of veterans. Over 8 weeks, the participants engage in both virtual and in-person sessions, which foster peer-based connections. They receive evidence-based training, resources and referral. Every participant also develops a crisis plan in the event their loved one becomes suicidal. A comprehensive evaluation by the University of Alabama concluded that the first year went very well. Participants are very satisfied with the program and reported that they would recommend it. It offers a safe space for families to share experiences and insights, and the program works. The evaluation clearly shows that the participants feel better equipped to make a difference in suicide prevention. This essential shift creates a proactive and supportive community that breaks down barriers, reduces stigma, and achieves upstream prevention of suicide. Blue Star Families recommends the VA facilitate grantee networking opportunities to enable the sharing of best practices instead of the existing one-way updates from the VA. We encourage oversight of the Fox grant-funded programs to assess the effectiveness of those grantees, and we recommend reauthorizing the most effective solutions. And finally, we recommend authorization of this program or a similar one at DoD to provide currently serving families the same approach to suicide prevention. Every one of those service members becomes a veteran. If we can get upstream, that prevents a lot. Then on the PACT Act. The PACT Act marked a huge victory for our community. The impact is staggering, and it's personal for me. My chief of staff, Jenny Aiken, tragically lost her 35-year-old Army husband, Captain Cooper Aiken, who had transitioned to veteran status when he got ill. They were sure he would beat his cancer, but they did not. To a service-connected, the family would have been in financial crisis, literally bankruptcy, if the PACT Act hadn't passed. While VA outreach on the PACT Act is commendable, we encourage DoD to ensure that all transitioning service members are informed of this new benefit and why they should enroll in the VA, even if they are not suffering symptoms. We call on you to strengthen the PACT Act, provide new VA authorities when needs arise, and stand against any attempt to weaken the law. In terms of education, thank you for your work on the GI Bill and closing the 90-10 loophole. Please oppose all efforts to undo the hard-fought gains for our community to protect these generous benefits. And lastly, with transition, our 2023 survey showed that half of veterans described their transition as difficult or very difficult, and it's all about time. For those who had less than 6 months, they had a difficult transition. Those with 1 to 2 years had a successful transition. Early engagement with TAPS is critical. Thank you so much for having me.
Ms. Jabslow, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Tester, Chairman Bost, Ranking Members Moran and Takano, and members of the committee. On behalf of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America and our over 425,000 members and supporters, thank you for the opportunity to represent the nation's post-9/11 generation veterans here with you today. Now, you and your staff are well briefed on our priorities for the remainder of this Congress, which are also included in my written testimony. So I wanted to use this time to level set on behalf of my generation of veterans and on behalf of America at large. War changes you. Heck, even the act of making your will at 22 does, as I had to do on my way to Iraq almost 20 years ago. It can change you in some really terrible ways. For instance, one of my basic course buddies served with the Army Special Forces after we graduated. He was then asked to deploy over and over again as our nation's leaders chose to overly rely on our special operators post 9/11. And now, after repeatedly experiencing the horrors of battle, he has to sleep in a separate bedroom from his wife. Why? Because his night terrors are too much for her to handle. War can also change you in unexpected ways. Not everyone joins the military just to serve their country like I did. Serve their country they will, but maybe they just wanted to fast track out of the list of ideal circumstances they were born into. Maybe they just wanted something as simple as a reliable meal 3 times a day, and perhaps they were willing to put on a uniform to do it. And then you get orders to deploy, to fulfill your commitment to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Whether you're the most patriotic citizen when you signed up or not, when you're asked to put it all on the line for what we have for America, that changes you too. Many of us who served post 9/11 are now out of uniform. We're trying to live life in a country we risked our lives for and enjoy the way of life we fought for just the same. But many of us are struggling with what we see before us in our country today. In a recent member survey of IVA veterans, 74% told us they were dissatisfied with the way democracy is working in this country, while only 12% said they were satisfied. IVA veterans on the whole are therefore even less satisfied than the American people at large, whose satisfaction in Gallup recently reported had sunk to 28% as this debate continues to dominate our national discourse. To me, that has less to do with a system that's passed stress tests time and time again, but our leadership. When I was in the Army, our Army values, as some other vets who are in attendance here today can validate, spelled out leadership. Loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. I may have left the Army 15 years ago, but I still carry those Army values with me today and wake up every day trying to live by them. And what I want to encourage each and every one of you more than anything to do today, and in this most important year in our nation's history, is to follow our example. Instead of pandering to our community, instead of promising to meet our every demand, how about you show us that you're willing to also put it all on the line for what we have here in America? How about you demonstrate selfless service, honor, and personal courage? Because that's what we really need from you more than anything else, more than any benefit we may have earned and deserve. Like many other combat vets, I'll never be the same after going to war. My perspective on life has been reshaped forever, and my perspective on what we have here in the United States has also changed. I'm also fortunate enough to have made it home to a newfound appreciation for our country. But like many vets, I have buddies who weren't as lucky. They gave their lives and their families lost a loved one for what we have here. And you need to show up for them as much as you want to show up for us. When a fellow platoon leader lost his life during my first deployment in Iraq, executing the very moves that I would have made if I had been assigned the mission he got on that fateful day, I made a promise to myself that I would live a life worthy of his sacrifice. And so again, in closing, I'll encourage all of you who serve in this body that regularly disappoints the American people, that can't figure out a way to fulfill its most basic responsibility of funding the government, to not just profess that you'll do right by our veterans, our troops, and their families, to not just promise to help us achieve our legislative priorities, but to show us that you share our commitment to this country and are willing to work across lines of difference to protect and defend what we're so lucky to have here. And by God, that you're willing to live a life that's worthy of the fallen sacrifice. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Jedlow.
Oh, it's on?
Mr. Mims, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Tester, Chairman Bost, Ranking Member Takano, Ranking Member Moran, and distinguished members of the Veteran Affairs Committee for Congress. The Blinded Veterans Association is honored and thanks you for the opportunity to present our legislative agenda for the coming year. The Blinded Veterans Association was formed in 1946, and so I want to point you to March 28th, which is the anniversary of the formation of the Blinded Veterans Association in 1945 by some blinded veterans at Old Farms Hospital in Connecticut. This is our 79th year of operation. As our legislative priorities, I want to list most of them and give you reasons for some of them. One of our priorities is the establishment of a federal advisory committee on equal access. And I'll just tell you now, a lot of our priorities hang on this committee coming into fruition. We also support, as many others, the formation and the continuing development and furtherment of services for America's women veterans. They are, by most knowledge, the largest sector of growth in the veteran population, and they need the help. I want to ask for this enhancement and the continued support for adequate protection for guide and service dog handlers on VA property. I know personally of incidents where veterans have gone to VA with their service dogs and have been attacked by dogs that are not service dogs. And they've been taken out of service, those dogs. We're talking about a $50,000 plus investment in that dog and the cessation of that veteran's access. I want to ask for continuation of the funding for VA blind rehab services. Right now, recently, the population of veterans that were served by VA blind rehab services more than doubled from around 40,000 to over 81,000. And now in the wings, we have 1.2 million low vision veterans, veterans whose visual acuity is no better than 20/70, as opposed to those that are legally blind with a visual acuity no better than 20 to over 200. And so as that population and the demands on that service continue to grow, we definitely need increased funding in order for them to continue and provide adequate service to America's blind and low vision veterans. I want to ask for better mental health care, as many others have too. Suicide is on the rise, and it's not lessening by any means among the population of veterans who have lost one of what is considered to be the most important sensory system that we have, our eyesight. And so I want to comment that blinded veterans, we served like every other veteran. And yet when we come back where we are now, we can't even see the country for which we fought. And so as I ask for better, the preservation
of ocular health services. We are not in favor of optometrists who are not qualified to do so to perform internal eye surgery, invasive eye surgery. They're not qualified, and it threatens the health and safety of our blinded veterans. And I ask that you work with us to see that that does not happen. I want to ask for increased, if you will, support for honoring our veterans that were disabled on active duty. And so we support the act that would make sure that they don't have to take an offset in their disability pay because they take retirement pay. They served honorably and they deserve to be compensated honorably after their service. I will say here that the Federal Advisory Committee that I mentioned, on that hangs almost all of our priorities for us. With that committee, hopefully we have a seat at the table, of course, and we can have the opportunity to present what are for us unique shortcomings in VA service. To us, it's a shame that the organization, the administration that is supposed to represent and present us blind veterans with sensitive, caring, informed medical care falls short. And so there's not a reason for us to fall short. But the VA, like so much of the rest of the world, is a very visual environment. And we're asking that you help us in pursuing erasure, if not that, then at least diminishment of those visual barriers and obstacles that exist in the VA system. And we're not talking about $1 billion to do this. A lot of it, we're only talking about common sense approaches to the problems. And some of the solutions don't cost any more than a few $1,000s. The VA took the unit out of their new employee orientation. That would simply take 5 to 15 minutes to show new employees how to guide a blind patient, to and from a clinical visit or around the medical center. They don't deem that to be important. Well, I've been bounced off door frames, run into doors. I've had people that grab my dog's harness or leash or my cane, or simply just pull on my sleeve to lead me through a clinic. And if you would take that behavior and apply it to yourself, I think you understand my contention that for many of us blind veterans, it's very difficult for us to leave a visit at the VA Medical Center and get home with our self-respect and dignity and the respect that the VA has for us intact. And so I'm asking that Chairman Tester, Chairman Bost, Ranking Member Takano, Ranking Member Moran, and the distinguished members of the committee support us in our pursuit of our legislative priorities for the coming year. And with that, I thank you for this opportunity to present, and I welcome your questions.
Mr. Mims, thank you.
Thank you.
Colonel Fenner, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman, ranking members, other distinguished members of the committee. I'm proud to represent Service Women's Action Network here today. We're a national nonprofit of almost 10,000 members who advocate and support currently serving women and women veterans. First, we thank Congress for recent legislation from PAC to Deborah Sampson, MAMO, Protecting Mom Who Serve, and more. As we continue to work with you on your oversight and new legislation, we really appreciate when your staffs help share the reports that you require so that we can help you some more. We also thank the VA for quickly implementing the PACT Act and for its expansion and some other new policies. The VA has steadily improved benefits processing and care. We're still processing the new VA Equity Action Plan and other recently released reports, but we know the details the devil is in the details of the implementation of that, and your oversight will be critical. We also thank the other VSOs here. We partner with them, they make constructive recommendations, they improve many lives. If we had more time, I would echo all of these concerns. Instead, I'll focus on very few of the women's complex and intersecting challenges that we hear from our members and partners every day, and you have our longer testimony. We feel invisible or worse. Women face a lack of respect often because they did not receive recognition for their contributions. This underpins almost every other issue. More creative outreach is required to those of us who have been insulted, neglected, ignored, especially our elderly, or those who are afraid of or angry at the VA. We do thank the VA for passing the very old and outdated new motto. We ask now that you pass the JAX Act Plus to recognize all the Lioness female engagement and cultural support teams. Sexual assault and harassment at the VA must be eliminated. It is devastating that we have to add VST to MST. The now more than 3 reporting reporting systems have to be rationalized and made consistent nationally to start to get at this problem. MST claims processing and care must be less traumatizing. Congress must pass the SAVES Act. The VA and DoD should collaborate even more in the TAPS program that includes portions for MST survivors from their transition from service to veteran status. And the VA must continue to improve its processing for upgrading characters of discharge. Bad paper discharges are related to a host of collateral issues that come with MST and other challenges. Women's health care must be continually assessed and improved. With the increasing number of women veterans, the range of care they need, and the issues that keep them away from the VA must be addressed. This includes reproductive health care. Fully implement the final IFR, eliminate copays for FDA-approved contraception, expand eligibility for ART, including IVF, beyond the newly promised policy, expand targeted research rather than just classifying women and minorities as lesser included cases, and also abide by Section 1557 of the ACA. Now, the new DAV report that you'll hear about tomorrow, and maybe some of you already have, shows that the increase in suicides among women veterans is horrific. We applaud the DAV for their research and VA's research and task force efforts. And we welcome as well the commitment to work closely with women veterans of the VSO working group. VA must specifically name this as a #1 priority, allowing Congress to fence funding for the program. The bottom line is culture change. Further and significant culture change at the VA is required in order to make meaningful progress. We appreciate congressional actions and VA initiatives, but these efforts must be constant and continual because these problems have persisted forever. Adding new laws and policies and making operational changes do help on the margins, but they will not meet the promise of the nation to all veterans. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel. Mr. Lyon, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Tester and Bost, ranking members Moran and Takano, members of the committee, thank you for allowing Student Veterans of America to present on our annual legislative priorities for 2024. SVA recently finalized a new strategic plan, reinforcing our commitment to equity for student veterans. Despite being exceptionally successful in higher education, veterans face unique challenges post-military service. Our aim is to collaborate with these committees to alleviate these barriers, ensuring a prosperous transition to civilian life. SVA chapters are the breathing heart of our mission. Higher education research shows that What leads to ultimate success for students is a sense of belonging on campus. This is no less true for student veterans, and our chapters provide that sense of belonging through the shared experience, peer support that veterans need after separation from military service. With that being said, if you are here today with Student Veterans of America, would you please stand or raise your hand to be recognized? Thanks, y'all. In the current academic year, SVA chapter leaders are leading active and engaged chapters on a network that now spans 1,647 chapters throughout the globe. They are working with student organizations across the world. They're hosting networking and career events. Our chapter leaders are leading programs to improve mental health or train suicide prevention. They're volunteering in their local off-campus communities. They're sponsoring youth sports teams. And they're doing all this while advocating for their members on national, state, and local levels. SVA chapters help one another and those in their community during challenging times, and as a result, they are creating a sense of belonging for veterans making the difficult transition into higher education. Before proceeding, SVA would like to thank the members for their work on the Senator Elizabeth Dole 21st Century Healthcare and Benefits Improvement Act as we continue to support making vet tech permanent and expanding VSOC, veteran success on campus. And as a personal note, I'd just like to thank Senator Dole. Her and her late husband, Senator Bob Dole, have served as inspirations and mentors to me. I had the opportunity to serve as an usher at Senator Bob Dole's funeral. Senator Elizabeth Dole, I couldn't think of a better namesake for your lasting legacy in our community. Thank you, ma'am. Further, we'd also like to express our gratitude for yesterday's introduction of the Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parity Act of 2024. As a longstanding policy priority for SVA, we are encouraged to see progress here. In the time that remains, I'll briefly outline 3 of our highest policy priorities from the voices of our community: today's student veterans, military-connected students, students who are family members, caregivers, and survivors, all of whom are earning their degrees to better their lives and the potential for themselves and their families. First, SVA is committed to being an ally of the VA while driving accountability measures for VA's efforts to modernize its systems and improve customer support and the overall experience for users of the GI Bill. The GI Bill is the gateway to the VA, and a seamless GI Bill process is key to establishing trust and confidence in the agency with every veteran served by VA. We urge the committees and VA to assess how these changes can affect GI Bill users. Delays in benefits could hinder veterans' education and their mental and emotional health. Second, SVA is currently investigating the significant potential for veterans to experience disparities in their economic outlook when compared to their civilian peers. Disparities exist even amongst those veterans with higher education degrees, despite earning more annually. The highlights the unique challenges faced by veterans in achieving economic stability and prosperity. The causes can be attributed to variance in employment opportunities, delays in getting wealth value from the job market due to military service, and obstacles stemming from the military transition experience. The prospect of economic disparities for veterans may serve as a disincentive for military service in our all-volunteer force. Understanding the complex dimensions of these inequities is crucial for informing policies and interventions that are aimed at fostering economic opportunity and the transition for veterans. Third, SVA calls for a comprehensive review and update to monthly housing allowance calculations and gaps and disparities, such as those related to VRE, break pay, overseas institutions, and online instruction. It is worth noting that the DoD has implemented emergency BAH rate corrections for the last of 2 years to address the financial burden, rising housing costs facing service members. Student veterans are facing these same financial burdens and rising housing costs in the United States. And data shows that despite the generous GI Bill, student veterans are taking on student loan debt just to cover living expenses. Whether it be the lower subsistence rates for VRE compared to post-9/11 MHA, the lack of payment periods between academic terms, the flat rate for overseas learners, or the inequities in MHA for distance learners, student veterans and their families feel the disconnect. Thank you for your time, your attention, and devotion to the cause of veterans and higher education. At SVA, we know that investing in veterans is not only the right thing to do, but it also means investing in the future of American leadership. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan.
Mr. Clark, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman, ranking members, distinguished members of the House and Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs, I am honored to speak to you on behalf of AMVETS and present our legislative priorities for this year. First, we thank you and your staff for your time, efforts, and attention throughout the 118th Congress. Having caring staff, many of them veterans, working with us to solve complex challenges facing our community makes a significant difference. AMVETS has consistently presented veteran suicide as our top priority for 6 years, yet rates continue to rise as evidenced by VA data. Repeated declarations that enough is enough is enough. It falls short of prompting real change. Our veterans, their families, and communities suffer as a result of this inaction and lack of urgency. We implore Congress to truly embrace innovative solutions to significantly reduce these numbers. The $16 billion currently funneled into existing programs has proven ineffective in combating veteran suicide. Echoing the Journal of American Medical Association's recommendations from 8 years ago, AMVETS believes that exploring new and novel approaches is imperative. We commend the recent funding of innovative nonprofits through grants and urge the VA to closely examine these program successes for potential scaling. However, investment in these innovative efforts remains insufficient. In sectors like pharmaceuticals and biotechnology, R&D investment is often 10 to 15% of revenue. However, the VA funding for innovative alternative approaches represents about 1% of VA mental health budget. AMVETS proposes that the VA allocate 10% of its mental health budget to establish a new program aimed at enhancing the mental wellness of transitioning service members. This program should focus on preemptive measures to maintain physical and mental readiness and adopt positive strategies for trauma management to lower the risk of future suicides. Additionally, we recommend increasing the funding for nonprofit grants to 5% of the VA's mental health budget. This increase would bolster the VA's capacity to identify and expand upon effective interventions, potentially reducing suicide rates significantly. We recognize the shared concern for veterans' welfare among the members of Congress and appreciate your past support. Yet we urge you to channel your empathy into actions that transcends bureaucratic interest and prioritizes veterans' well-being. Without a shift towards a more proactive and innovative approach, we risk having another 36,000 veterans commit suicide. AMVETS calls for a renewed urgent commitment in saving lives and ensuring veterans lead fulfilling lives. AMVETS has many other priorities for this Congress, including passing the major Richard Starr Act and increasing the dependency and indemnity compensation for our military survivors. Our survivors should not be punished for choosing to remarry, and we encourage all of you to support the Love Lives On Act. AMVETS and others are advocating for legislation to allow all congressionally chartered veteran nonprofits to receive tax-deductible donations. Currently, if organizations like AMVETS allows honorably discharged non-wartime era veterans to become members, we can no longer receive tax-deductible gifts, which I'm sure you all agree makes no sense at all. The VSO Equal Tax Treatment Act rectifies this issue. We are grateful to Congressmen Wenstrup and Panetta for their advocacy in getting the legislative passed out of the Ways and Means Committee. We also ask Congress to oversee and support the successful completion of the electronic health care record at VA facilities so our veterans receive the modernized care they deserve. We need all hands on deck here. Failure is not an option, and the days of being a political football need to end. Despite significantly increasing funds for ineffective mental health models at the VA, urgent attention is needed also for optometry, the third most used specialty. Optometrists delivering over 70% of VA's eye care face low pay and potential political challenges to their scope of practice. Poor conditions deter recruitment and retention, driving optometrists away and making the VA an employer of last resort. Consequently, the VA risks incurring higher costs through community care against veterans' preferences. By working together, we can ensure that our veterans receive the care, recognition, and opportunities they deserve, laying a strong foundation for a more resilient and supportive society for all who have served. Thank you. I look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. And now, I would like to now recognize myself for 3 minutes for some questions. Mr. Clark, you know, in your testimony, you mentioned promoting readiness and recruiting efforts for the next generation of veterans. Do you think improving the TAP program could help with retention and recruiting of future generations of service members?
I absolutely do. I think it's the way of the future, and I think also there's other initiatives we could follow that are out there to help increase the recruitment of new members, new service members. Sir.
Thank you. Mr. Roth, okay. In your testimony, you mentioned the GI Bill benefit is a great retention tool for veterans and their families. What are some ways we can continue to improve the GI Bill from what the families talk about?
Well, continuing to allow for the transferability of the GI Bill to loved ones is very key. We see in our survey that up to the majority of currently serving veterans plan to transfer their GI Bill to their child or their spouse, and we find a tremendous amount of pride that that service member has in being able to provide that education for their children. So maintaining that and also continuing to work against the for-profit schools that erode the benefit.
Well, I'm going to tell you, my son is very happy to hand his off to his son. He's doing that right now, and I think the school that he's qualified for is really fantastic, and his parents are just so happy that that's going to be taken care of that way. So also then, Mr. Mims, what can you do to ensure that your members have equal access to employment after service?
I don't know that that's going to happen in our lifetime, but the thing that we have to do is constantly work on the obstacles and barriers between people with disabilities and employment. It's been in place for years, and it still hasn't risen much from the 30% rate of unemployment. So technology, for me, as a blind person, has erased a lot of the barriers and obstacles, and I've actually had a successful career with the VA after I went back to college and got my degree. Technology helped me get the degree. Technology helped me get the job that I got, and it helped me do what I think is a very good job while I had it. And so we need to invest in what will erase these obstacles. You know, if it costs $1 billion, what do we get back? We get back billions of dollars in effort from qualified people who are given the best of what they have and what they can do. You can't put a price on it and say it's comparative, and so it's not worth it because it costs too much.
Appreciate that. My time's almost expired, so Representative Levin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank everybody here for their service, and particular shout out to everybody from California, if you're out there. All right, you're out there. Really is an honor to be part of this committee and to represent our great Marines and sailors at Camp Pendleton. Wanted to just go through a few pieces of legislation. And Mr. Lyon, I'll begin with you. There you are, Mr. Lyon. SVA has long supported efforts to create GI Bill parity for Guard and Reserve service members, and we're so grateful for your advocacy on this issue, which helped us pass the Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parity Act in the House last Congress. Can you speak just briefly on the importance of this change and the need for our communities to get the bill enacted into law this Congress?
Yes, sir, and thank you for your ardent support of just making sure that every day in uniform counts. And, you know, when we look at the evolving needs of our country, there should be no difference in the way one serves from active duty, Guard, or Reserve. So by being able to create this parity, we're making sure that there's true equity in those that choose to serve during the all-volunteer force.
Thank you so much for that. General Linnington, I'll turn to you. I'm proud to have the Wounded Warrior Project support for H.R. 1786, the Get Rewarding Outdoor Work for Our Veterans, or GROW Act. This bill seeks to ensure that veterans, especially those who have recently returned to civilian life, can obtain rewarding careers in conservation, resource management, and environmental protection at the Department of Interior. Can you please describe the impact that working in the great outdoors on conservation projects can have on veterans' overall well-being?
Congressman, thank you for that legislation. I think it's really important. I think we all know the importance of mind-body connection. Veterans, as you know, are very comfortable in the outdoors. They've been trained. They're very, very comfortable, especially in conservation and working with the Department of the Interior. In our surveys, we know that financial strain is always a concern for veterans, unemployment and financial strain, and your legislation that you proposed not only alleviates the financial strain, but it gets our veterans that are in isolation into the outdoors, where not only are they comfortable, but they value that camaraderie that comes with serving. So we really support the legislation. Of course, it was in my opening statement, and we speak more about it in our written testimony. But thank you for sponsoring that legislation.
Thank you. And I got to go quick because I only have 3 minutes. Colonel Fenner, in your testimony, you called for VA to expand eligibility for assisted reproductive technology, including IVF, to help our veterans start families when they face infertility challenges. I was deeply disappointed by the Alabama Supreme Court's recent decision against women's personal health decisions to help create families. We must enshrine the right to access IVF into law so that everyone who wants to start a family can do so. Thank you. And I'm out of time, but I will just say this is very important for our military and veteran families as well, and I urge my colleagues to pass the Veteran Families Health Service Act, which will enshrine this coverage into law. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. General Berkman, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and I'd like to thank all of you. By the way, any Michiganders in the crowd? All right. At least there's a couple of us everywhere. I'd like to thank everybody for your testimony today and for all the work that your organizations have done on behalf of our nation's veterans, because we wouldn't be a nation without our veterans. I also greatly appreciate all your advocacy and the support that has helped us advance some extremely important veterans bills in the House. For example, I know Senator Dole is sitting here, the Elizabeth Dole Home Care Act and Gerald's Law that you championed and became reality. We couldn't have done it without you, so thank you. You know, when you only have 3 minutes, you don't waste time, but as a Marine, I don't waste time anyway. So let's get right to a heart of one thing. You know, Mr. Thomas, you know, I greatly appreciate being able to hear PVA's perspective on the issues facing paralyzed veterans. I'd also like to thank you for PVA's work with my office and your endorsement of H.R. 6373, the Veterans Spinal Trauma Access to New Devices, or Veterans STAND Act, which I recently introduced along with Chairman Bost, Health Subcommittee Ranking Member Brownlee, and Congresswoman Debbie Dingell from Michigan. We introduced this bill to make it easier for veterans with spinal cord injuries and disorders to be evaluated and receive assistive technology that they are already clinically eligible for. Could you just speak, Mr. Thomas, just a little bit about what that means, that to be assisted with new technologies?
Thank you for that question. So anytime that we can get any new assistive technology that can help us either ambulate, wheel around, function in our homes, it is a great thing to have. We know that technology is changing on a daily basis, and having new equipment is great. Also, in your bill, we see that it also goes into talk about individuals having annual exams. We feel as though all members with SCID should have an annual exam yearly.
You know, and time is short, but you ended with a perfect point. Just because we're doing something one way today, that doesn't mean two things could occur. That veteran could have issues, plus or minus, depending on how it's going, but also the introduction of new and appropriate technologies to continue to advance the personal capabilities, especially when it comes to spinal cord injuries. So I'm honored to be with all of you today. Thank you all for being here. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back 5 seconds.
Thank you, General. Representative Lansman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here and your incredibly important, helpful testimony. One question, well, two, if I can get to it, but I'd love to hear, obviously, from you, Mr. Line first, but anyone else who wants to jump in. We have a really wonderful VA in Cincinnati, and one of the things that we're struggling with is how we get young people, younger veterans in, and many of you spoke to how important time is as it relates to any of these efforts. And so I'm curious, what's the one thing you would say to a young person that we need to be communicating more to get them in? You know, what's the most compelling selling point to get somebody engaged and learning about what they're eligible for? And then as it relates to engaging young people and getting veterans in earlier, what's the one thing that we should be doing that we're not?
Thank you very much for the question. I'll do my best to answer it succinctly. When we look at the transitioning force, the vast majority of those individuals will have served in the military for 6 years or less. The vast majority of that population will be of the prior rank, like myself, E5 or below. Those individuals, at over 70% rate, their likely transition strategy includes education and training. What I would say to them is they don't realize it's that high, and you belong in higher education, and it's for you. Second, what we could be doing that we're not is understanding that the GI Bill and all VA education benefits serve as the front door for the VA. Chronically, the VA struggles to reach out to veterans under the age of 45, and the transitioning force is under the age of 30. If we use those VA education benefits to reach out to the population and both let them know what they are eligible for by making it easy, but also let them know that the federal government is an employment opportunity, we can fill gaps in two unique ways. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Education and jobs. And on our end, a piece of advice, I mean, one of the things that seems simple enough is we have talked about getting the VA on the website and then to spend some money on digital to make sure that it's popping up in front of folks. Just a simple, very quick benefits, like, you know, here's who I am, what am I eligible for? And it doesn't say you're 100% eligible for these things, but by and large, you're probably eligible for these things. Click here to learn more.
In Cincinnati specifically, you could literally support the Vet Success on Campus, but then you could, so that's VSOC, or then also the VA Vital program to ensure full access to all that VBA and VHA has, but also conduct outreach from that local Cincinnati location to every educational institution around you. The likelihood that you will find veterans there is better than almost anywhere else.
Thank you. You back. Thank you.
Thank you, and we want to thank everyone for being here today. Let me say this as chairman. As members, all of us, and especially as chairman and ranking members, understand that we're going to work to try to move as many of our priorities as we can, and even in this environment, we're going to try to move them. But our job is not only to move legislation and do that, but our job is also to make sure we do the oversight that we have to make sure the VA is delivering on those things that we pass and realize that they are law and not suggestion. Sometimes that's some problems we have when you're dealing with the second largest bureaucracy in the world. And let me say this, from my position as chairman, I will fight for you every day. It is, as I said off the start, it's very personal to me. But I want to thank you for sharing your priorities, and it's clear we have a lot of work to do. And we're going to deviate from the adjourning, and Mr. McMahon, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Bost, I
Or 3
thank
minutes.
you.
3 minutes.
Hey. Yes, I will be concise. Thank you, Chairman Bost. Yeah. Chairman Tester, Ranking Member Takano, and Ranking Member Moran holding this hearing today. I would also like to thank the VSO presence here today to tell us about their respective organizations and legislative priorities for 2024. I want to first recognize one of the witnesses on this panel who is a leader in the veterans advocacy from my home state of Indiana, President of National Association of State Directors in Veteran Affairs, Dennis Weimer. The National Association of State Directors of Veteran Affairs is an essential voice for veterans at both the state and federal level. They are responsible for facilitating cooperation amongst the VA directors in each state to provide uniform, equal, efficient, and effective services to veterans and their family members. As further testament to Mr. Weimer's commitment to Indiana veterans, on top of his duties as president of the National Association of the State Directors of Veteran Affairs, Mr. Weimer also serves as director of Indiana Department of Veteran Affairs. On Monday, I was privileged to spend the entire day with Director Weimer and the Dole Vets Assistant Secretary James Rodriguez, meeting with the service providers and businesses that assist veterans with career exploration, training, and job placement, as well as supportive services for veterans experienced or at risk of homelessness. Together, we saw the Work One facility in Hammond, the Homeless Veterans Reintegration Program in Gary, Indiana, and the Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio Regional Council of Carpenters Joint Apprenticeship Training Center in Maryville, and Operation Charlie Bravo in Crown Point. I thank you for taking the time to come to my district to see the incredible programs we have assisted veterans in Northwest Indiana. Thank you for your service and your commitment to helping veterans in Indiana and across our country, and thank you for being here to testify today. With that, I'd also like to ask a question. I would like to take this time to ask Mr. Lyon about the education-related benefits available to veteran survivors and dependents. Today, I introduced the Gold Star Family Education Parity Act, which would sunset Chapter 35 and enroll survivors and dependents into Chapter 33, ensuring they have the access to the superior education benefits provided under the post-9/11 GI Bill. Mr. Lyon, do you believe Chapter 35 is an adequate benefit, or is it time to modernize for Gold Star families?
When we look at the issues, sir, thank you first for the question and the nuanced understanding of our population and community. It's greatly appreciated. When we look at the needs for Gold Star family members, those survivors are often forgotten. We umbrella term the population and suggest that military connected is enough to define folks that have lost their connection to the military, often in very tragic circumstances. By looking at comprehensive reform, we have the ability to ensure that not only is no one left behind, goes for those in the uniform, but also for the family members that they do leave behind, and that I would assume that everybody in this panel would agree that we hold it as a sacred obligation to support them deeply. Reform is desperately needed. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Lyons, thank you for your opinion. Oh. And with that, I yield back to Chairman Bost.
Thank you. So, obviously, it's clear that we have a lot of work to still do in the year ahead, and we will continue to look to each of you to kind of be the guiding light to help us do those things that we need to do, and to make sure that we provide for those who have given the service to this country. We'll keep the record open now for a week, so any future input that you would want to make, and with that, we're adjourned.